My name's Tyler, I'm 20, and this story takes me back to the summer after my sophomore year of college. I came home for break thinking it would be a chance to relax, maybe reconnect a little with my family, and save up more money working shifts at the diner I'd worked at since high school. Instead, I walked into a situation that would change the way I looked at my parents forever. I've always been the responsible one in my family. While my younger brother, Ryan, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, I was the one expected to keep my head down, work hard, and not complain. Since I was 16, I'd been stashing away every paycheck, every tip, and every extra dollar I could earn into a savings account. By the time I left for college, it was something I was genuinely proud of, my little safety net. I didn't splurge like Ryan did. I didn't beg my parents for money. I was building towards something, an apartment off campus, grad school, maybe even my first car. That account was mine, built penny by penny. Ryan, on the other hand, was a completely different story. At 17, he was already spoiled beyond belief. He had the newest phone, expensive sneakers, and my parents seemed to bend over backward to make sure he never felt deprived of anything. He didn't work a part-time job, didn't save a dime, and somehow still had money to spend. I used to shrug it off as he's the baby of the family, but deep down it bothered me, especially when I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up past midnight waiting tables while Ryan stayed home playing video games. When I got home that summer, I noticed right away that something felt off. Ryan was in the driveway revving a brand new motorbike, grinning ear to ear. The thing gleamed in the sunlight, sleek black with chrome edges, the kind of bike you don't just pick up. My first thought was, how on earth could my parents afford that? We weren't poor, but we weren't the type of family that could casually drop that kind of money either. I went inside, dropped my bag, and asked my mom how he managed to get it. She looked at me with this overly casual smile and said, "Oh, your father and I helped him out." It was time he had something nice. That set my stomach twisting, but I didn't push yet. I figured maybe they had dipped into their own savings. Maybe Dad had picked up over time. It wasn't until later that night when I logged into my banking app that the truth hit me like a punch in the chest. My balance, the one number I always checked like a security blanket, had been completely drained. Every dollar I'd worked for gone. I sat there staring at the screen, scrolling through the transactions, my hands shaking. The withdrawals weren't even subtle. My dad had been transferring money straight from my savings account into his checking account over the last few months while I was away at school. I confronted them immediately, storming into the living room where Dad was watching TV. My voice cracked when I asked, "Where is my money?" He didn't even flinch. He muted the television, turned to me with this smug little smirk, and said, "You should be proud to help your brother out. That motorbike is going to change his life." I felt my chest tighten with rage. Proud. Proud that they had stolen from me. Proud that they thought Ryan's joyride was more important than the years I'd spent working late shifts and eating instant noodles just to save. I let out this laugh, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. Dad's eyes narrowed, and he snapped, "What's so funny?" I looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "Because that account you took from was." And that's where things started to spiral in ways none of us could have predicted. "Because that account you took from was in my name only." I finished, my voice low but steady. "You had no right to touch it." The smirk slipped right off my dad's face for a second, though he quickly covered it with his usual scowl. "Watch your tone, Tyler," he said sharply. "We're your parents. We've supported you for 20 years. Don't act like you built that money all by yourself. We made you. We gave you a roof. We let you go to college. The least you can do is help your brother get a start in life." That word, let, echoed in my head, as if I hadn't earned my scholarships, worked through summers, and fought tooth and nail to cover everything that wasn't. As if college was some gift they could dangle over me like a prize. I tried to reason, though my hands were still shaking. "Dad, that account was supposed to be my future. My money. You didn't even ask me. You just took it. That's theft." Ryan, who had been eavesdropping in the doorway, laughed. "Oh, relax. You act like it's the end of the world. You'll make more money later. I need the bike now." He leaned casually against the frame, looking every bit the smug younger brother who had just won some invisible war. "Besides, it looks way better on me than a bunch of numbers in some account." That was the first time I truly felt the line snap inside me. The one that had held back years of resentment, years of swallowing favoritism and pretending it didn't matter. My brother had my parents wrapped around his finger, And now he was literally riding around on the back of everything I had built for myself. Mom finally chimed in, her voice soft but patronizing, the way she always did when she tried to smooth things over. Sweetheart, you'll understand one day. Ryan has been through a lot lately. He needs our support more than you do. You're strong, you can handle setbacks. He's fragile. You know how he gets when he doesn't have nice things. Do you really want him to feel left out? I just stared at her, floored. Fragile? This was the same kid who'd been babied his entire life, who never faced a consequence that didn't magically disappear when Dad stepped in. Fragile was the excuse they used every single time he messed up. Fragile was why Ryan had never had a job, never paid a bill, never learned the value of anything. Mom, I said carefully, you're telling me my years of saving don't matter because Ryan's feelings are more important than my future? She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. It's family. Family sacrifices for each other. But it didn't feel like family. It felt like I was a wallet with a pulse, and Ryan was the golden child who could do no wrong. Over the next few weeks, the situation only grew worse. Anytime I tried to bring it up, my dad would shut me down with the same rehearsed lines. We know what's best for this family. Stop being selfish. Or the worst one, you'll thank us later. Meanwhile, Ryan paraded around the neighborhood on his new bike, bragging to his friends that his parents bought it for him. I started noticing smaller things too, little slights I hadn't fully clocked before. My room had been taken over while I was gone, with half my stuff shoved into boxes so Ryan could store his gaming setup there. My mom accidentally gave away a couple of my old clothes, claiming she thought I'd grown out of them, even though I'd told her to leave them. Every meal conversation turned into some way of praising Ryan, his style, his independence, his plans to maybe, possibly, get a job someday if he felt like it. And me? I was the ghost in my own house. The one who, when I tried to assert myself, was told I was being dramatic. When I asked about paying me back, Dad laughed in my face. We don't owe you anything. You owe us. One night, Ryan came into my room while I was lying awake, scrolling through my empty account balance for the 100th time. He leaned against the doorframe again, that same smirk plastered across his face. You know, you should be grateful, he said casually. Without me, what would you even have to complain about? You'd just be some boring college kid with no story to tell. He winked and walked out, his laugh echoing down the hallway. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about power. My parents had handed my brother a weapon, and he was enjoying every second of watching me suffer. And I knew then that if I didn't do something, if I didn't stand up for myself, this wouldn't be the last time they'd take from me. But the way I chose to stand up for myself, that would be the turning point none of them expected. The night things truly snapped was a Saturday in late June. I'd picked up a summer job bussing tables at a steakhouse across town, trying to scrape together whatever I could to start rebuilding. Every paycheck felt like a reminder of what I'd lost, but at least it was something. I'd been working double shifts, barely home, which was probably why I didn't notice what my parents and Ryan were up to until it was too late. I came home around midnight, exhausted, smelling like grease and dishwater, ready to collapse. But when I stepped into my room, I froze. My desk was gone. The laptop I'd saved for, the one I needed for school, was missing. Half my textbooks and notebooks were stacked in boxes, shoved against the wall like clutter. I stormed into the living room, where Ryan was sprawled across the couch with his game controller in hand, grinning. "Oh, hey," he said without even pausing his game. "Don't freak out, but I borrowed your laptop. Needed something better for my graphics. That old one of mine couldn't handle it." My stomach sank. "Borrowed," I said slowly. "Where's my desk?" Dad looked up from his chair with that same irritating calm. "We moved it into Ryan's room. He needed more space for school and his hobbies. Don't worry, we'll figure something out for you before you go back to college." I felt heat rush to my face. That laptop isn't just for fun. It has my work, my papers, my research on it. You can't just. Ryan cut me off with a laugh. "Relax. I'll give it back eventually. Maybe when I save up for something else. Until then, you can use the family desktop." The family desktop. The ancient, wheezing dinosaur in the corner of the living room that could barely load email, let alone handle the programs I needed for school. That was when the betrayal hit me full force. It wasn't just money anymore. It wasn't just favoritism or small slights. They had stripped away the tools I needed to succeed, the very things I had earned for myself, and handed them to Ryan like party favors. I remember looking at my mom, hoping, praying, for once she'd stand up for me. But she just gave me that same soft, patronizing smile. Honey, it's just a computer. Don't be so dramatic. You can share. Isn't that what family does? I couldn't even speak. I just stood there, fists clenched, every word I wanted to say burning in my throat. Over the next week, the humiliation deepened. I'd come home from work to find Ryan sitting at my desk, my laptop open, greasy snack wrappers scattered across the keyboard. My files, my carefully organized folders, had been shoved aside so he could install games. One night, I caught him scrolling through my saved essays, laughing at the titles. You actually write this stuff? God, no wonder you're broke. Who cares about this garbage? I started locking the door to my room, but Dad ripped the lock right off, saying, "We don't keep secrets in this house." I tried moving my things into the garage, but Mom insisted the space was too cluttered and Ryan needed it for his bike gear. Every attempt I made to carve out a space for myself was bulldozed under the excuse that Ryan needed it more. The final blow came the night I got my midsummer paycheck. I'd been watching my account like a hawk, making sure not a single cent went missing again. But when I logged in, my stomach dropped. The balance wasn't right. Not empty, but short by a few hundred. I called the bank immediately, and the representative explained in a careful voice that there had been an authorized user on the account. My father. He'd added himself months earlier without telling me. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. Of course I added myself, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm your father. Everything you have comes from us anyway. You think you can play at being independent while still under our roof? That money is family money. Don't forget who raised you. I remember Ryan grinning in the background, revving his motorbike keychain like it was some kind of trophy. Thanks for dinner last night, by the way, he added with a wink. On you, I guess. That was it. The moment the last bit of trust, of hope that maybe they'd see me as more than a tool, shattered completely. I went to bed that night with my heart pounding, staring at the ceiling, realizing I was trapped in a house where my hard work wasn't just unappreciated. It was being stripped from me piece by piece. And for the first time, instead of just feeling anger or despair, I felt something colder. Resolve. Because if they thought they could keep taking from me without consequence, they had no idea what was coming. The days that followed felt like living inside a slow, crushing weight. Every time I walked through the front door, I could feel my chest tighten, like the air itself carried judgment. My parents barely looked at me unless it was to scold me for attitude or to remind me how lucky I was to have a roof over my head. Ryan, on the other hand, strutted around the house like a king. He'd toss my laptop bag onto the couch when he came home from hanging out with friends, never bothering to ask if I needed it. He left crumbs and soda cans all over my desk, and when I pointed it out, Dad just said, "Don't nitpick your brother. He's got a lot on his plate." What exactly was on his plate? Playing video games, polishing his motorbike, and scrolling through my bank app to see how much money he could guilt my parents into taking next. He'd even wave his phone at me and say things like, "Maybe I'll borrow another 100. You don't mind, right?" Family helps family. Always with that smug smile, always knowing my parents would back him no matter what. I kept working long shifts at the steakhouse, sometimes until 2 in the morning, dragging myself out of bed for another round the next day. I barely saw my friends anymore, too ashamed to explain why I couldn't hang out or why I always looked so drained. My coworkers noticed, though. One of them, a waitress named Kelly, pulled me aside during a break and asked, "Are you okay? You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." I wanted to tell her everything, how my own parents had robbed me, how my brother paraded around on stolen money, how I felt invisible in my own home. But the words stuck in my throat. Admitting it out loud felt like it would make it even more real. So I just said, "Yeah, just tired." At home, things only got worse. One night, I came back late and found Ryan hosting half a dozen of his friends in the living room. My laptop was open on the coffee table, music blasting, greasy pizza boxes stacked on top of my textbooks. When I tried to grab my things, one of his buddies laughed. "Oh, this is yours." Ryan said it was family property now. I froze, heat crawling up my neck, but Ryan just smirked. "Chill out, Tyler. Don't be such a control freak. You're always working anyway. You don't even use this stuff." I carried the pizza-stained textbooks back to my room in silence. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. For the first time, I thought, maybe I should just leave. But then the doubt crept in. Where would I go? I didn't have enough money for rent, not after they drained my account. My car was barely holding together, and the thought of crashing on a friend's couch made me feel like a burden. I felt stuck, pinned between humiliation and helplessness. The lowest point came a week later. I had a huge paper due for a summer course I was taking online, something I needed to keep my scholarship in the fall. When I went to retrieve the file from my laptop, it was gone. Deleted. Hours of work, gone. Ryan shrugged when I confronted him. Relax. I needed space for my games. Didn't think your stuff was important. I didn't even yell. I just walked back to my room, shut the door, and sat down on the edge of my bed. For the first time in years, I felt tears sting my eyes. Not just from anger, but from this deep, bone-deep exhaustion. I had nothing left. No money, no tools, no support. And the people who were supposed to have my back were the ones who'd pushed me down. That night, lying in the dark, I realized something. They wanted me weak. They wanted me to accept this role, the hardworking ghost who made sacrifices so Ryan could shine. But the longer I lay there, the more a different thought took root. What if I stopped playing their game? What if instead of letting them drain me dry, I found a way to use what they'd taken against them? It wasn't clear yet, not fully, but the seed was planted. And as I quietly began writing down plans, tucking notes into the bottom of my backpack where no one would find them, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, it was small things, changes so subtle my parents and Ryan didn't even notice. I started picking up every extra shift I could at the steakhouse, volunteering to cover for coworkers who needed nights off. It meant long hours, aching feet, and days where I practically lived on coffee, but it also meant that slowly, carefully, my paychecks began to grow. This time, I didn't put the money into the account my dad had access to. I marched into the bank one afternoon, exhausted from work but determined, and opened a brand new account in my own name. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell my friends. The banker asked if I wanted to add a joint user, and I shook my head so hard it startled her. Just me, I said firmly. Only me. For the first time in months, I felt like I had taken back a little bit of control. Work was grueling, but oddly empowering. The more shifts I worked, the more I began to enjoy the independence of it. I didn't owe my parents an explanation. Every dollar was mine, untouched by their hands. And while Ryan bragged about his motorbike and loafed around, I quietly stacked paychecks in my hidden account. It was like having a secret weapon. One night, after a particularly busy dinner rush, the manager pulled me aside. "You've got a solid work ethic, Tyler," he said, looking impressed. "Most of the college kids flake out, but you show up. Keep this up, and there's room for you to move up here." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. For months, I'd been treated like a joke at home, like my hard work meant nothing. But here was someone actually recognizing it, rewarding it. That night, I went home tired, but with a small smile tugging at my lips. Meanwhile, I also began thinking long-term. At school, I had a part-time job lined up for the fall, plus a professor who'd hinted about an internship opening. If I could just hold on through the summer, I'd have not just money but opportunities. My parents and Ryan might have stolen my savings, but they couldn't steal my drive. Still, I kept up the act at home, quiet, compliant, even a little withdrawn. I let Dad lecture me, let Mom guilt me, let Ryan taunt me with his motorbike keys dangling in his hand. Inside, though, I was planning. Every cruel comment, every dollar they took, every book they treated like garbage, it was fuel. I wasn't going to lash out in some reckless burst of anger. No, I was going to be patient, methodical. It was during this period of quiet rebuilding that something unexpected happened. One of the regular customers at the steakhouse, a middle-aged guy who always ordered the same ribeye and coffee, struck up a conversation with me. He asked about school, and I admitted I was studying business. He smiled and said, "You've got the hustle for it. Reminds me of when I was your age." Turns out, he owned a small logistics company and was looking for part-time help with data entry and filing. The pay was better than bussing tables, and it could lead to networking opportunities. I took the job. Suddenly, I had two streams of income, cash tips from the steakhouse and a steadier paycheck from the company. I worked myself ragged, but every time I logged into that secret account and watched the numbers climb, I felt stronger. By July, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. My laptop may have been hijacked by Ryan, but I scraped together enough from tips to buy a used one off a coworker. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I guarded it like treasure. I worked on my coursework late into the night, applying for internships, updating my resume. And all the while, I played the role of the obedient older son at home, quietly listening as Dad praised Ryan's independence for learning how to clean his bike, or Mom cooed about how Ryan deserves nice things. They had no idea that while they were crowning him king of the house, I was out there building a future without them. The funniest part? Ryan started to get restless. A motorbike can only hold someone's attention for so long, and by August, he was already hinting at needing more. New gear, upgrades, maybe even a car next year. I listened to him whine at dinner about how unfair it was that he didn't have what he wanted yet, and I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from laughing. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one drowning. I was climbing. And soon enough, the tables would turn in ways none of them could even imagine. By late August, I had settled into a rhythm, one life at home, another life outside it. At home, I was still the quiet, overlooked son, letting Dad's lectures and Ryan's smug comments slide off me. But outside, I was slowly piecing together a version of myself that my family didn't even know existed. At the logistics company, the data entry job I'd started with began evolving. My boss, Mr. Green, noticed I had a knack for organization. I'd come in early to sort files, streamline spreadsheets, and catch small mistakes others missed. One Friday afternoon, he called me into his office. "You're sharp, Tyler," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I like people who don't just punch a clock, but think ahead." Ever considered project management? I didn't know what to say. No one had ever asked me that, what I considered. At home, everything was decided for me, dismissed as selfish or dramatic. Here, someone was asking me what I wanted. I'd like to, I admitted. He nodded. "Good. We've got some training modules. Stick around with us, and you'll have real responsibilities by next year." That moment planted a seed. This wasn't just a summer job. It was a stepping stone into something bigger. If I played it right, I could build a career here, one my parents couldn't take away. Meanwhile, I was also learning practical things, useful things. Working at the logistics company gave me an inside look at contracts, supply chains, and financial records. I wasn't stealing information, but I was paying attention. I saw how businesses protected themselves with clauses, how they tracked every cent, how they kept detailed records so nothing slipped through. And I thought back to my own drained account, to Dad casually helping himself to money that wasn't his, to Ryan laughing at me like it was all some game. The difference was staggering. Out there, in the real world, everything had to be accounted for. At home, my parents treated my savings like their personal piggy bank. And the more I saw that contrast, the more an idea began forming in the back of my mind. The second piece of my setup came through the steakhouse. By then, I wasn't working as many shifts there, but I'd built good relationships with the staff. The manager, a wiry guy named Carlos, trusted me enough to let me help with scheduling and balancing registers at the end of the night. I wasn't handling huge sums of money, but I was learning, again, the importance of paper trails, of keeping everything clean and recorded. I started keeping my own records too, quietly. At night in my room, I began documenting every withdrawal from my old account, every unauthorized transaction my father had made, every instance where Ryan had taken something that was mine. I wasn't sure yet what I'd use it for, but I knew one thing. Evidence had power. It was around this time that Ryan's greed tipped the balance in my favor. He started pushing my parents for more. New bike gear, a gaming chair, money to take a girl out. He framed it like he was maturing, like these things were needs rather than wants. And my parents, stretched thinner than they wanted to admit, began to look uneasy. I overheard late-night whispers in the kitchen about credit card bills, about how expensive supporting Ryan had become. That was when I realized I was standing at a crossroads. They had drained me dry once, and they'd do it again the second they found out I had money saved. Unless I played this carefully. So I doubled down on the act. At dinner, when Ryan bragged about needing new boots for his bike, I nodded and said nothing. When Dad complained about bills, I shrugged like I didn't have a penny to my name. I made myself small, invisible, harmless. Because the less they suspected, the more time I had to grow stronger. And behind the scenes, I kept building. My savings account grew. My boss gave me more responsibility. I quietly applied for scholarships and internships that could take me out of my parents' reach for good. Every step I took was like pulling a thread tighter, weaving a net that would eventually trap them in their own choices. By the time fall approached, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was positioned. For the first time, I had money they couldn't touch, skills they didn't know I had, and allies outside the house who respected me. And in the shadows of my own planning, I began to see the shape of something bigger forming. Because when the moment came to strike back, I didn't just want to stand up for myself. I wanted to make sure they could never use me like that again. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. It was late September, just before I was set to head back to campus. The tension in the house had reached a boiling point. Ryan had started complaining nonstop that his motorbike needed upgrades, new exhaust, better tires, some custom paint job. And of course, he expected my parents to foot the bill. One evening at dinner, he leaned back in his chair, twirling his fork between his fingers. "So, Dad, I was thinking we could dip into Tyler's account again. He doesn't need it. I mean, he's already got scholarships, right? And he's living under your roof. It's only fair." I froze. Not because I was afraid they couldn't touch my new account, but because I realized Ryan still thought my money was his safety net. He had no idea I'd outgrown their grip. Dad cleared his throat. "That's not a bad idea, son. Tyler's been awfully quiet lately. He can afford to help out again." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was it. The perfect chance. I put my fork down slowly, keeping my face as neutral as possible. "Actually, that's fine. Go ahead and check." Ryan's grin widened. "See? He finally gets it." After dinner, Dad logged into the old account from the family desktop. I leaned against the doorway, watching his smug confidence curdle into confusion. He clicked, refreshed, clicked again. Finally, he turned toward me, frowning. "Why's the balance still empty? Where's your paycheck money?" I shrugged. "What paycheck money?" Ryan piped up. "Don't play dumb. You've been working double shifts all summer. There should be something in there." I smiled faintly, just enough for them to see it. "Oh, I stopped using that account months ago. Opened a new one. In my name only. You don't have access." The silence that followed was heavy, almost comical. Ryan's face twisted in disbelief. "Wait, you mean you've been hiding money this whole time?" Dad's jaw clenched. "You ungrateful little." I cut him off, my voice calm but sharp. "Ungrateful? You stole from me. You didn't just take money. You took years of my work, my laptop, my future. And you expected me to keep letting it happen. So no, I'm not ungrateful. I'm done." For the first time, they didn't have a comeback. But that was only the opening move. The real revenge came a few days later. I'd been meticulously saving every record, bank statements, transaction logs, screenshots of transfers my dad made from my old account. I'd even noted dates and amounts of withdrawals that lined up with Ryan's motorbike purchase. I printed it all out, neatly organized in a folder, and walked it straight into the branch manager's office at the bank. I explained everything. How I was the sole account holder, how my father had added himself as an unauthorized user, how money had been siphoned off without my consent. The manager's expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. "This is serious," he said. "You could pursue legal action." And that's exactly what I set in motion. I didn't tell my family at first. I let them believe their intimidation still worked, that I was just sulking. Meanwhile, the bank launched an investigation, freezing the old account and flagging the transactions. The fallout started small. My dad tried to withdraw money one afternoon, only to be told the account was locked. I watched from the couch as he came home, red-faced and muttering. Ryan asked if he could still get his upgrades, and Dad snapped at him for the first time in months. For me, it was like watching dominoes tip over in slow motion. Then came the letter, official, sealed, and addressed to me. I opened it at the kitchen table while my parents watched. It explained that the bank had found my father's withdrawals unauthorized. They were offering to restore the stolen funds to me directly and advised that I could press charges for fraud if I wished. The color drained from Dad's face as I read it aloud. Ryan sputtered. "You can't. He's your father." I looked at him, calm and steady. A father protects his kids. He doesn't steal from them. That night, my mom tried to corner me in the hallway, tears in her eyes. "Tyler, please. You don't understand what this will do to our family. Can't you just forgive and forget?" But the thing was, I did understand. For the first time, I had the power. They'd treated me like nothing, like a bank account with a body, and now the tables had turned. And I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. I didn't sleep much the night after the letter came. For hours I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, weighing the choice in front of me. Part of me still carried that old instinct to back down, to swallow the pain, to keep the peace. But another part of me, the part that had worked double shifts, built a secret account, and learned how to survive without them, knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread out in front of me. My dad walked in, his jaw tight, eyes red like he hadn't slept either. Ryan trailed behind him, quieter than usual, which was rare. My mom clutched a coffee mug like it was the only thing holding her together. Dad started in immediately. "Tyler, let's be reasonable. You don't need to make this ugly. We're family. Family works these things out." I let him finish, then calmly slid the folder of evidence across the table. "You didn't treat me like family when you drained my account, or when you gave my laptop to Ryan, or when you called me selfish for not letting you take more. You treated me like a resource. And now I'm done." Ryan scoffed, trying to bring back some of his usual bravado. "So what? You're gonna throw Dad in jail? You'd ruin your own family over some money." I turned to him, meeting his eyes. "It's not just about money. It's about respect. Something none of you gave me. Actions have consequences. You taught me that lesson the hard way. When I formally filed the fraud complaint through the bank, it was like lighting a fuse. Investigators began asking questions, and Dad quickly realized how bad it looked. Unauthorized access. Transfers lining up perfectly with Ryan's motorbike purchase. Months of evidence neatly recorded by me. There was no spinning it as family sharing. The bank sided with me, restoring every stolen dollar into my private account. And as for Dad, he wasn't arrested, not yet, but he was slapped with a fraud warning that would stain his record for years. His credit score took a nosedive, and the whispers in town weren't kind. Everyone knew my family. Suddenly, people started connecting the dots. Why Ryan had a flashy new bike while I was busting tables late into the night. The respect my father had always clung to in the community evaporated. The tension at home reached a breaking point. My mom begged me daily to undo this before it destroyed them, but I stood firm. Ryan raged, screaming about how unfair it was, how I had ruined everything for him. He stopped riding the bike around as proudly, because now everyone who saw it knew it had been bought with stolen money. His friends stopped coming around, too. Nobody likes standing next to a sinking ship. As for me, I packed my bags early for school. I didn't wait for tearful apologies that never came. Before I left, I stood in the doorway of my old room, now cluttered with Ryan's junk, and looked at my parents one last time. "You wanted me to sacrifice for family," I said quietly. "But real family doesn't bleed one person dry so another can live large. You taught me that lesson better than anyone." Dad tried to speak, but his voice cracked, and for once he had no words. Ryan glared, his fists clenched but powerless. Mom just wept into her hands. I turned, walked out to my car, and drove away with my restored savings and something far more important, my independence. Months later, as I sat in my off-campus apartment, working late on a project for my internship, I thought back to that night in the kitchen when Dad smirked and told me I should be proud to help Ryan. Now it was me smirking, because the account they had drained wasn't just my savings. It had been my first real lesson in power, and I had learned it well. That was the last time they ever took anything from me. So, a bit of background before I get into this mess. My name's Jake, I'm 26, and I guess you could say I've always been the odd one out in my family. Not for any dramatic reason, I'm just different. My siblings, Amanda, 28, and Ryan, 30, followed the perfect path my parents always wanted. College, marriage, steady jobs, and the white picket fence dream. Meanwhile, I took a different route. I didn't go straight to college. I worked random jobs, traveled a bit, and finally found my footing in freelance graphic design. I make decent money, live comfortably, and honestly, I'm happy. But to my parents, that's not enough. They don't outright say it, but it's clear in the way they treat me. I'm the immature one, the one who hasn't figured things out yet. And the worst part? They don't even try to hide it. Every family gathering, every holiday, there's always some comment about how I should start thinking about my future or find a real job like Ryan. As if I'm some lost teenager instead of a full-grown adult. So when my parents invited me to a big family dinner, I knew what to expect. These things were never casual affairs. My mom loved hosting these over-the-top, fancy dinners where everyone dressed up like we were meeting the president. And, of course, they always centered around Ryan and Amanda's amazing accomplishments. Still, I decided to go. Because despite everything, they're my family. I keep giving them chances, hoping maybe this time will be different. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I showed up right on time, dressed nicely, because God forbid I give them another reason to criticize me, and immediately felt out of place. The house was buzzing with conversation, relatives catching up, glasses clinking, the smell of expensive food wafting from the dining room. I spotted Ryan and Amanda near my parents, talking to some of our aunts and uncles. As soon as I walked in, my mom's eyes landed on me, scanning me up and down like she was checking for imperfections. "Jake," she said, plastering on a smile. "So glad you could make it." "Yeah, wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a polite grin. Dad clapped me on the back. "Hope you're hungry." We went all out this time. I nodded, making small talk with a few relatives, but something felt off. There was an energy in the room, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then, as we all started heading to the dining room, I found out why. The dining table was long, elegantly set with expensive plates and silverware. The main table had about 10 seats, all taken by my parents, Ryan, Amanda, their spouses, and a few other relatives. Then, off to the side, in a completely separate area, was a smaller table. A literal kid's table. I blinked, half expecting this to be some weird joke. But no. The small table was set up with mismatched chairs, slightly lower than the main one. And at that table? My younger cousins. I looked back at my mom, confused. "Where am I sitting?" I asked, already knowing the answer but hoping, praying, I was wrong. She gave me that same forced smile. "Oh, you'll be over there with the kids." I laughed, waiting for her to say she was joking. She didn't. "You're serious?" I said. Mom's smile barely wavered. "Jake, don't make this a thing. It's just easier this way." I glanced around, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in and say something. But no one did. Ryan and Amanda avoided my gaze, pretending to be too wrapped up in their conversations. My dad was already pouring himself a drink like nothing was wrong. "Easier how?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. Mom sighed, like she was the victim here. "Jake, it's just that the main table is for the adults. You know, married couples, people with responsibilities." "Right," I said slowly, feeling my jaw tighten. "And I don't count as an adult because—" "Sweetheart, don't be difficult," she said, dropping her voice like I was embarrassing her. "Ryan and Amanda have spouses, careers, homes. They're at a different stage in life. And I'm, what? Some teenager who doesn't belong?" "Of course not," she said, but the way she avoided my eyes told me everything. "It's just more fitting this way." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just about seating arrangements. This was them putting me in my place. Telling me, without saying it outright, that I wasn't their equal. That I wasn't worthy of sitting with the real adults. And that's when I realized something. They didn't see me as part of their world. No matter what I did, no matter how successful I became on my own terms, I'd always be the kid who hadn't figured it out yet in their eyes. I could have made 6 figures, bought a house, gotten married, none of it would matter. Because in their minds, I wasn't good enough. I could feel my face heating up, but I wasn't going to let them see me get angry. I wasn't going to argue, wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of making me look childish. So I did the only thing I could think of. I smiled. A small, polite smile. The kind you give when you're done. "You know what?" I said, my voice light and even. "I think I'm gonna head out." Mom blinked. "Jake, don't be ridiculous. Sit down." I shook my head, already backing away. "No, it's fine. You guys enjoy your dinner." "Jake," Dad said, finally looking up. "Stop being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I let out a short laugh. "I'm just following the seating chart. Guess I'll go sit somewhere else." And with that, I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just left. At first, I thought they'd just let me go. That they'd shake their heads and call me immature behind my back. But as I got into my car, my phone started buzzing. Then buzzing again. And again. I glanced down at the screen. Calls. Texts. My mom. My dad. Even Ryan and Amanda. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because whatever they had to say, I knew one thing for sure. They didn't expect me to actually leave. And judging by how desperately they were calling me, they realized they'd made a mistake. But it was too late. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I sat in my car for a moment, just watching my phone light up with call after call. My mom, my dad, even Amanda, who usually stayed out of things, were all suddenly desperate to talk to me. I wasn't going to answer. Not yet. Instead, I took a deep breath, put my phone on silent, and drove off. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get away, to clear my head. As I pulled onto the highway, my mind kept replaying the scene at the dinner table. The way my mom had smiled like she was doing me a favor. The way Ryan and Amanda had kept their mouths shut. The way my dad had dismissed me as dramatic, like I was some moody teenager instead of a grown man. The worst part? None of them thought they were wrong. They weren't panicking because they felt bad. They were panicking because I had actually left. Because I hadn't played along this time. I kept driving until I found a quiet diner on the edge of town. One of those old-school places with neon lights and sticky booths. I parked, went inside, and ordered a coffee just to have something to do with my hands. I needed to think. I wasn't just angry. I was tired. Tired of always being the one expected to tolerate things. Tired of being the only one who had to be the bigger person. Tired of playing along with a family that only saw me as a lesser version of my siblings. But what was I supposed to do now? A notification popped up on my phone. Another message. This one from Ryan. Ryan texted, "Dude, just come back. It's not that serious." Not that serious? I scoffed, shaking my head. This wasn't about a seat at a table. It was about the fact that they saw me as less. And the fact that they expected me to just accept it. I was about to turn my phone off completely when another message popped up. Mom texted, "Jake, answer your phone. We need to talk." Then another. Mom texted, "Come back now. You're embarrassing us." There it was. The real issue. It wasn't about me. It was about how it looked to everyone else. I took a sip of my coffee, considering my options. I could ignore them. I could go back and pretend nothing happened. Or I could do something they wouldn't expect. I had a feeling this wasn't over. And if they thought I was just going to roll over and let this go, they were in for a surprise. I sat there for a while, stirring my coffee, watching the steam rise as I thought through my next move. I could practically hear my mom's voice in my head, that sharp, exasperated tone she used when she thought I was being difficult. "Jake, stop overreacting. Just come back and stop making a scene." I used to fall for that. I used to think maybe I was the problem, that I was being dramatic. But this time? No. I wasn't going to let them guilt trip me into backing down. I took a deep breath and finally unlocked my phone. There were even more messages now. Mom texted, "We're all waiting for you to come back. It's time to be an adult and stop sulking." Dad texted, "Enough of this nonsense. You're ruining the evening." Amanda texted, "Jake, please just come back. This is getting awkward." And then, the one that made me angry, Mom texted, "We saved you some food, but if you take much longer, we'll have to throw it out." That was it? That was the best they could do? They weren't sorry. They weren't even pretending to be. They just wanted me to stop embarrassing them. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around my phone. If they thought I was overreacting, maybe it was time to show them what actual consequences looked like. So I made a decision. I paid for my coffee, got back in my car, and drove home. Not to their house. To mine. I wasn't going back to that dinner. I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. And I definitely wasn't going to let them treat me like an afterthought ever again. When I got home, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and turned it face down on the table. Then, I grabbed a drink from the fridge, sat down on my couch, and turned on the game. As the night dragged on, I kept thinking about the dinner. My mom's face when she told me I wasn't mature enough to sit with the adults. The way my dad had rolled his eyes, dismissing my feelings like they were an inconvenience. And Ryan and Amanda? They just sat there, silent, as if it was normal to treat me like that. I wondered how much longer they'd keep up the act. How much longer they'd pretend that everything was fine, that I was the one causing the problem. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't the one causing problems. I was the one standing up to the problem. The phone buzzed again, this time from Amanda. I could almost hear her voice in my head as I unlocked it. Amanda texted, "Jake, seriously. I get that you're mad, but you're blowing this out of proportion. Just come back, we'll talk about it." I laughed bitterly. Blowing it out of proportion? I had spent my entire life letting things slide, biting my tongue while my family made me feel small. And now that I'd finally stood up for myself, they wanted me to just sweep it under the rug like always? No. I left her message on read. I didn't want to be the angry, dramatic one anymore. I didn't want to be the problem just because I wasn't okay with being treated like a child. But I was angry. and I wasn't going to apologize for it. The night stretched on, and the phone kept buzzing. Calls, texts, all of it. I ignored them all. At some point, my phone started to feel like an anchor, pulling me back into their drama, into their expectations. But I had made my choice. I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to apologize. And I sure wasn't going to let them pretend like I hadn't been treated like garbage. Then, just as I was about to start watching a movie to distract myself, I got a message from my dad. Dad texted, "You've gone too far this time. You've made a scene and embarrassed everyone. Come back and apologize, or this will get worse." I could feel my heart rate pick up. Get worse. Was he threatening me? Was I supposed to just bow down and grovel? The thought of going back and begging for their forgiveness made my stomach churn. It was as if they thought they had the power to control me, like I was just some kid who'd forgotten his place. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the reply button. I wanted to fire back, tell him what I really thought about the way he treated me, but I knew that wasn't going to do anything. All it would get me was more guilt and more manipulation. Instead, I just turned my phone off. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of their expectations, the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't, had been suffocating. But now, it was like a burden had been lifted. Maybe they didn't understand what was happening, but I did. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. I was finally doing something for me. Still, I knew they weren't going to let this go. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd just forget about it. They were going to come after me, each one in their own way. Maybe they'd guilt-trip me or try to manipulate me with promises of family unity. Maybe they'd even pretend like nothing happened and act like I was the one who'd overreacted. But none of that mattered now. I was done letting them make me feel like I wasn't enough. The next morning, I woke up to more messages. I'd left my phone off for the entire night, but I knew exactly what they'd say. Mom texted, "I can't believe you'd act like this. After everything we've done for you, you leave us like this?" Ryan texted, "Jake, stop being stubborn. Just come back and let's pretend this didn't happen." Dad texted, "I'm disappointed. You're acting like a child." The messages were predictable, and part of me was almost relieved to see they hadn't changed. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it definitely wasn't an apology or any sign that they might recognize how wrong they were. I thought about responding. I thought about telling them that I wasn't going to keep playing their games. I thought about calling them out, pointing out how they'd never really seen me as an adult, how they always treated me like the youngest, even though I was in my 20s. But then I remembered what I had promised myself last night. I wasn't going to engage. So, I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the day doing things for myself. I went to the gym, grabbed lunch at a place I'd always wanted to try, and spent the evening reading. It was peaceful. I had a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing I had taken control of my own life for the first time in a long while. But I wasn't naive enough to think this would be over. The phone calls started up again the next day. My mom mostly. "Mom, I can't believe you'd do this to your family. After everything we've done for you, you owe us an explanation. Amanda, can we talk? I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it." I was done listening to them. I wasn't going to beg them to understand. I wasn't going to try and make them see my side. They had already made up their minds. It was time for a new plan. This wasn't just about a kid's table anymore. It was about how they had treated me my entire life. It was about the constant expectation that I would just accept being less than. I knew what I needed to do, and I was going to make sure they never treated me like that again. Days passed, and the messages and calls slowed down. It seemed like my family thought I'd just give in eventually, that I'd cave under the pressure of guilt. But each time I saw their names flash on my screen, I just let the phone ring or ignored the texts. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. I wasn't going to just fade away, though. I wasn't going to disappear into silence. I'd thought long and hard about this, and when I decided to take control, I knew what I had to do. I'd been avoiding them for a few days, but it was time to stop hiding. I needed to confront them, once and for all. So, I took a deep breath, grabbed my keys, and drove over to my parents' house. When I pulled up, I saw my mom standing at the door, her arms crossed, looking like she was waiting for me. I could tell she expected me to apologize, to waltz in and beg for forgiveness. She probably thought that once I showed up, everything would be fine again. But I wasn't going to play that game anymore. I parked my car, walked up to the door, and knocked. My mom opened it, her expression tight, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes when she saw me standing there. "Jake, I'm glad you finally came. I didn't waste any time. I'm not here to apologize, I said flatly. Her expression faltered, just for a moment. She recovered quickly, though. What do you mean? You've been acting like a child, and we're all waiting for you to come back and make things right. This is getting ridiculous. I took a deep breath. This was it. I had been stewing in my frustration for years, letting it fester. Now, I wasn't going to hold back. I'm not the one acting childish here, Mom. You and Dad have treated me like a second-class citizen for as long as I can remember. You've always brushed me aside like my thoughts and feelings don't matter. She blinked, taken aback. Jake, that's not true. We love you. We've always loved you. We've given you everything we could. I shook my head. Love? If you loved me, you wouldn't treat me like I'm not worthy of sitting at the table with you, like I'm still some kid who doesn't know what's going on. You tell me I'm not mature enough to sit with the adults, but you never let me be an adult. You keep me at arm's length, as if I'm not allowed to have a voice. Her face flushed, and I could see her struggle to maintain control. You're overreacting. You need to calm down and understand that it's just how things are, tradition, and you're being difficult. No, you need to understand something, I retorted. I'm done being quiet about this. I'm done pretending like it's okay. For years, you've treated me like I'm less than. You've always given my siblings the benefit of the doubt while making me feel like I had to prove myself. And I've had enough of it. I could hear my heart beating louder, but I didn't let myself flinch. This was the moment. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm not going to sit at the kids' table just because it's easier for you. I'm an adult, and the way you've treated me, the way you continue to treat me, is wrong. My mom was quiet for a moment, and I could see the realization settling in her eyes. I wasn't going to back down this time. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. I don't know where all of this is coming from, Jake. We've done everything we could to raise you right. Why can't you just appreciate it? I do appreciate the good things, Mom. But what I don't appreciate is being dismissed over and over again. I don't appreciate being made to feel like I'm less than everyone else in this family. And I'm done. I'm done playing along with this charade. I took a step back, but I wasn't finished. I couldn't walk away without saying everything that had been festering inside me for so long. You've made me feel invisible for years. You've made me feel like nothing I did was ever good enough. I've been ignored and undermined. And all for what? So you can keep up your perfect little family image while I'm stuck in the background. There was no going back now. I had laid it all out there. I turned and started walking toward the driveway, not looking back. But my mom's voice stopped me. Jake, don't just walk away from this. Don't make this worse. I stopped my back to her. You've made it worse, Mom. I'm done with the guilt trips, the manipulation. This isn't about a dinner or a seat at a table. It's about the way you've made me feel every day of my life. I took a few more steps, the weight of her words trailing behind me. I was leaving, but I was also standing my ground. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. As I opened the car door, I heard my dad's voice from the house. Jake, if you walk out that door, don't come back. Don't ever come back. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door, cranked the engine, and drove away. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door, cranked the engine, and drove away. The roar of the engine felt almost like an exhale I had been holding for years, and with each passing mile, it felt like I was shedding more of the weight I had carried all my life. But the thing was, it wasn't over. I knew it wasn't over. The family hadn't just let me go quietly, like I thought they might. They were angry, and I was expecting that. But what came next wasn't just anger, it was something colder, something deeper. It had been a few days since that confrontation, and as expected, my phone had been blowing up nonstop. At first, I ignored every call, every text. I didn't want to fall back into that trap. But then, when I got a voicemail from my dad, a voicemail where he was practically begging me to come home and talk things through, I couldn't help but listen. Jake, this is your father. Look, I know things got heated, but you're not thinking clearly. You need to come back, sit down with your mother and I. This isn't how families work. Don't let this drive a wedge between us. I know you're angry, but don't make things worse. It was the same old line. Don't make things worse. The problem was they had already made it worse. Every time they pushed me aside, every time they treated me like an afterthought, every time they minimized my feelings, they made it worse. And yet, here they were, acting like I was the one who was unreasonable. I deleted the voicemail and blocked their numbers. It felt like I was cutting the last thread that had tied me to that toxic relationship. But the next day, my sister Rachel called. She was more level-headed, and I knew she was calling because she wanted to smooth things over. She didn't want to see the family torn apart. Jake, please, just talk to Mom and Dad. They're devastated. They don't know what went wrong, Rachel pleaded. Devastated? I scoffed. I'm the one who's been devastated for years. Have you ever listened to me, Rachel? Have you ever wondered why I'm the one who's always left out, always treated like I don't matter? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I know you feel that way, but it's not true. They love you. They just don't know how to express it. I don't need their love if it's conditional, I snapped. If they really loved me, they would have respected me a long time ago. I'm done being the punching bag. I'm done. Rachel was quiet for a long time, and I could tell she was trying to process everything. Jake, this isn't about the dinner or the seat at the table. This is about something deeper, something you need to work through with them. Don't let this destroy us, please. I sighed, rubbing my temples. It's not just about the dinner. It's everything. It's the years of being treated like I'm invisible. I can't keep pretending everything's fine just to keep the peace. Just think about it, okay? She said before hanging up. And just like that, the calls kept coming. My mom, my dad, my siblings, everyone trying to convince me to come back, to talk, to make it right. But as the days passed, I realized something. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation anymore. It wasn't just about standing up to them. It was about finally giving myself permission to live the life I wanted, without constantly trying to meet their impossible standards. And that's when it hit me. Maybe it wasn't just them who needed to change. Maybe it was me who needed to change. I didn't need to be the person they wanted me to be. I didn't need to sit at their table, under their rules, their expectations. I could build my own table, with people who understood me, who respected me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I was done with their manipulation. I was done with being the family's afterthought. So now I'm left with a choice. Do I continue down this path of self-respect and independence, even if it means severing ties with my family for good? Or do I go back, try to mend things, and keep pretending like nothing ever happened? I'm at a crossroads. So, Reddit, I'm asking for your thoughts. Am I in the wrong here? Should I try to repair my relationship with my parents? Or is it time to fully cut ties and live my own life, away from all the toxicity? Would love to hear your opinions. My name's Daniel, and at the time of this story, I was 29. It was Thanksgiving, the first one without Grandpa. He passed away 3 months earlier, and honestly, nothing felt the same without him. For as long as I could remember, Grandpa was the real head of the family. Not officially, of course, but he was the one everyone listened to. Every holiday, every argument, every messy family drama, it was always Grandpa who smoothed things over. Without him, it felt like the center of gravity was gone, and everyone was quietly circling each other, waiting for something to snap. The gathering was at my mom's house this year, same as always. Same peeling wallpaper, same wobbly dining room table that Grandpa had built back when Mom was a kid. The same turkey Mom always overcooked, the same passive-aggressive chatter floating across the table. It should have felt comforting in a twisted way. Familiar. But it didn't. Not this year. There was this thick, unspoken tension in the air, like everybody was pretending nothing had changed while secretly waiting for something, anything, to blow up. I sat near the end of the table, poking at my food, pretending not to notice the sideways glances coming my way. It had been happening more and more lately, ever since the reading of Grandpa's will. None of them said it out loud, but I could feel it. Resentment, jealousy, disbelief. They didn't understand why Grandpa had left almost everything to me. Not just sentimental things, not just his old pocket watch or a few trinkets. No, the house, the land, the savings, all of it. To me. I wasn't even the oldest grandchild. That was my sister, Emily. She was 31, prettier, louder, and infinitely better at schmoozing than I ever was. She had the kind of smile that could melt ice, the kind of charm that made people hand over their wallets without realizing it. And she hated me for beating her at something she couldn't control. I knew the whispers had been building since the funeral. Emily was the ringleader, no doubt. She was always good at rallying people to her side when she wanted to. Poor Emily, who spent so much time with Grandpa. Poor Emily, who was obviously the favorite. Poor Emily, who deserved better. I tried to tune it out, tried to rise above it. Grandpa had made his choice. I wasn't about to apologize for it. Still, sitting there, surrounded by fake smiles and brittle laughter, I felt the weight of it. It clung to me like a second skin. Every toast, every laugh, every clink of a fork against a plate, it all felt just a little too forced. That's when it happened. Emily, sitting directly across from me in her overpriced dress and 2 high heels, leaned back in her chair, twirling a glass between her fingers like she was hosting her own little talk show. She smirked, that infuriating, syrupy sweet smirk she always wore when she was about to stir the pot, and said, in a voice dripping with fake innocence, "Let's be thankful we're not pathetic like some people at this table." For a half second, the table went dead silent. Then, as if on cue, a few awkward chuckles floated up. My cousin Evan snorted into his napkin. Aunt Marcy hid a smile behind her glass. Even Mom gave this nervous little titter like she didn't know whether to laugh or scold her. I set down my fork, slow and deliberate. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but my face didn't show it. Years of practice. Years of swallowing my pride, of being the good son, the quiet one, the easygoing nephew. But something inside me clicked off like a light switch. I smiled, not the strained, polite kind I usually wore around them. A real smile. Calm. Measured. Deadly. Funny, I said, my voice steady enough to cut glass. Grandpa didn't think I was pathetic when he left me everything. The words hit the table like a bomb. You could feel it, the collective intake of breath, the shift in the atmosphere. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Glasses clinked against plates. Emily's face went slack. Her smirk wiped clean off as if someone had physically smacked it away. I wasn't done. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip of water, and said, almost casually, "Good luck finding somewhere else to live." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the worn-out carpet. See, what they hadn't figured out yet, or maybe they just hadn't wanted to believe, was that Grandpa's will didn't just leave me the house and land in theory. It was all legally binding. Transfer complete. Deeds signed. Paperwork filed. Everything that Mom and Emily and the rest of them had always taken for granted, the roof over their heads, the land they treated like their birthright, was now mine. I saw the realization dawn in Emily's eyes first, then ripple out across the table like a slow, spreading panic. Mom's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto her plate. Uncle Mark actually went a little pale, like he might faint right into his stuffing. Evan muttered something under his breath and shoved his chair back, suddenly very interested in leaving the table. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once in her life, she was completely at a loss for words. It was glorious. I just sat there, letting the weight of it settle in, letting them stew in it. Every fake laugh, every snide comment, every little jab they'd ever thrown my way, all of it led to this moment. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt powerful, but I wasn't here just to gloat. No, this was just the beginning. Because what none of them realized, not yet, was that I had plans. Big ones. Grandpa's house needed major repairs, ones they had ignored for years because it wasn't technically their responsibility. The taxes on the land were overdue. Utilities were in my name now. And when I was done, none of them would be able to pretend it was still theirs. I set down my glass, picked up my napkin, and calmly wiped my mouth. Then, as if nothing had happened, I turned to Aunt Marcy and asked, "Could you pass the potatoes?" She handed them over with a trembling hand. Emily finally found her voice, though it was a lot smaller than before. You can't be serious." I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Dead serious. Her face flushed bright red, and for a moment, I thought she might actually throw her glass at me. Part of me almost hoped she would. Let her throw the first real punch so I could finish what she started. But she didn't. She just sat there, seething, practically vibrating with rage and humiliation. And I just kept eating, slow and steady, like this was the most normal Thanksgiving dinner in the world. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I think it's better served with turkey, stuffing, and a side of stunned silence. And I was just getting started. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner dragged on like some kind of surreal fever dream. Nobody said much after that. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks scraped plates with a kind of desperate focus, like if they just pretended hard enough, they could rewind the last 5 minutes. But reality sat heavy over the table, thicker than the smell of burnt gravy. I could feel the stares, even when I wasn't looking. Aunt Marcy's watery eyes darting toward me and away again. Uncle Mark pretending to check his phone over and over. Evan, who kept glancing at Emily like he expected her to do something. Mom looked the worst, like she was trapped between outrage and terror, her mouth twitching like she was holding back 1,000 words she didn't dare say. And Emily. Emily didn't even try to fake it anymore. She sat rigid in her chair, gripping her glass so tightly I half expected it to shatter. Her eyes bore into me with a hatred so raw it was almost impressive. If glares could kill, I'd have been buried next to Grandpa by dessert. I ate slowly, methodically. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes. I made a point of savoring every bite, letting them stew in their silence. I wasn't in a rush. No, this moment had been earned. When dessert finally stumbled its way to the table, a sad-looking pumpkin pie with a cracked center, Mom cleared her throat and said, "Daniel, maybe we could talk later." Privately. Her voice was brittle, almost pleading. I set down my fork and dabbed my mouth with my napkin again. Slow. Deliberate. "Of course, Mom," I said pleasantly. Happy to. But I wasn't planning to let her steer the conversation. Not anymore. As people started clearing their plates, making excuses to get some fresh air or help in the kitchen, Emily cornered me by the entryway. Her heels clicked sharply on the worn hardwood, and her hands were balled into fists at her sides. "You can't do this," she hissed under her breath. This was supposed to stay in the family. I raised an eyebrow. It is staying in the family. I'm family. Or have you forgotten? Her lips curled like she wanted to spit something truly vile at me, but she held it back. Barely. I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle, a weak spot. "You don't even need it," she said, voice trembling. "You don't have kids. You don't have a family to raise here. What do you even want with all this?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Maybe I'm just tired of being treated like garbage by people who only show up when they think they can get something." Her nostrils flared. For a second, I thought she might actually hit me. She didn't. But the way she spun on her heel and stormed off was almost as satisfying. After most of the dishes were cleared and the stragglers had drifted toward the living room to watch a miserable football game, Mom found me by the back door. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, more fragile somehow. For a split second, guilt flickered in my chest. But it was quickly smothered by the years of memories, the dismissive comments, the constant favoritism, the way she let Emily get away with murder while I was expected to suck it up and be the good son. "Daniel," she said, wringing her hands, "I know you're upset. But you have to understand, this house is important. It's always been a place for all of us." I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. Funny. Never felt like that when I was growing up. She winced. "Look, I know we weren't perfect. But your sister, she's going through a tough time. She was counting on some of this." There it was. The real reason. She was counting on Grandpa dying and handing her a free house, I said flatly. "Don't sugarcoat it." Mom's mouth snapped shut. She looked away, staring out the dusty window like it held all the answers she needed. I don't know what we're supposed to do," she whispered. For a moment, I said nothing. Let her sit with it. Let her feel even a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt growing up, the way they always made me the outsider in my own family. Finally, I pushed off the wall and said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." Her eyes filled with tears, real ones, not the crocodile tears Emily had mastered, and for a second, she looked like she might beg. Actually beg. But she didn't. Pride is a funny thing. I slipped on my coat and grabbed my keys. As I headed toward the door, I caught a glimpse of Emily sulking by the fireplace, surrounded by a few sympathetic cousins. She shot me a look that could have curdled milk. I smiled at her. A real, genuine smile. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. And then I walked out into the cold November night, the door swinging shut behind me with a satisfying click. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because while they spent the night stewing in their anger and confusion, I was already moving to the next step. Grandpa hadn't just left me the house. He left me the land, acres of it, and a detailed letter about what he wanted done with it. He had known, long before he passed, what this family was really like underneath all the polite small talk and forced family photos. And he had trusted me to carry it out. They thought losing the house was bad? They hadn't seen anything yet. That night, as I drove the long way back to my apartment, I thought about Grandpa, about the long talks we used to have on the porch, just the two of us while everyone else was inside arguing about something stupid, who got the biggest slice of pie, who deserved more help from him that month, who was working so hard and getting so little appreciation. I was the one who sat and listened, even when I didn't always have much to say. Maybe that's why he trusted me in the end. The letter he left me wasn't long, but every word was careful. Grandpa wasn't the type to waste breath or ink. He had written that he loved his family, but he wasn't blind. He saw how they treated each other and how they treated me. The house, the land, the savings, he left them to me because he wanted them to be used with purpose, not drained dry by people who thought they were owed the world for showing up once a month and smiling for a photo. I pulled into my parking spot, sat there for a while with the engine ticking as it cooled, and finally pulled out my phone. I already had the number saved. The real estate lawyer Grandpa had worked with for years. Mr. Hadley. The man was sharp, efficient, and not easily swayed by crocodile tears or empty threats. I thumbed out a simple text, ready to proceed. Let's meet Monday. By the time I went to bed, my mind was racing, but there was a steady, quiet satisfaction underneath it. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for permission. I wasn't the one hoping to be noticed or included. I was holding the cards now, and I wasn't about to fold. The next few days were a study in chaos. It started with the messages. At first, they were cautious. Mom sent a few polite texts asking if I'd had time to think about things. Emily tried to act casual, asking if I wanted to grab coffee and chat. The guilt train was leaving the station right on schedule, fully loaded and gaining speed. I ignored them. Then came the escalation. Emily called me 3 times in one afternoon, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. She started with sugary sweet, "Hey, Danny, just want to talk, okay? Love you," and ended the third message practically snarling, "You're making a huge mistake. Huge. Don't come crying to us when you realize what you've done." That last part made me laugh out loud. Me crying to them. That was rich. By Sunday night, Mom caved and just showed up at my apartment. She stood in the hallway in her old winter coat, holding a pie in a plastic grocery store container like some kind of peace offering. I didn't even bother inviting her in. I just stood there in the doorway, blocking her path. "Daniel," she said, with a forced smile. "Honey, can we just talk? As a family." "Sure," I said lightly. "Whose family? You or Emily's little fan club?" Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw something real flicker there. Not anger, not manipulation, just regret. "We made mistakes," she said softly. "But you're still our son." I stared at her for a long moment, then said, "You didn't think of that when you were laughing at me across the table." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I shook my head, stepping back just enough to close the door between us. "I'll let you know when the paperwork's done." Click. I didn't hear from her after that. Monday came. I met with Mr. Hadley in his office, a cozy place filled with dark wood and the smell of old books and stronger coffee. We went over the paperwork Grandpa had prepared. The land was to be divided, but not among the family. Part of it was being sold to a conservation trust, something Grandpa had been passionate about for years but never told anyone. The rest was already under contract to a developer for a small fortune. Grandpa had negotiated everything before he passed away. All I had to do was sign. And I did. When the contracts were finalized, I not only owned the house free and clear, but I'd have enough money to ensure I never had to take another mocking Thanksgiving dinner ever again. Grandpa had made sure of that. It was his final gift and his final justice. The kicker? Without the surrounding land, the house itself was worthless. The property taxes would skyrocket with the new developments around it. The utilities were overdue. Repairs needed. And none of them, not Emily, not Mom, not Uncle Mark, had the savings or the credit to fix it. They had counted on me rolling over. On me being the quiet, easygoing Daniel who would carry them without complaint. They were about to find out that Daniel didn't live here anymore. 2 weeks later, I scheduled a formal notice to be sent by courier to Mom's house. A single letter, crisp and professional. Notification of property ownership transfer, tax responsibility, and an official eviction date if arrangements weren't made. They had 30 days. 30 days to pack up and figure out their own lives. Or 30 days until the sheriff showed up at the door with orders to remove them. The same night the letters were delivered, my phone lit up with a torrent of calls and texts. Not just Mom and Emily, cousins, aunts, even some friends I hadn't heard from in years. All of them singing the same tired song. How could you? This isn't what Grandpa would have wanted. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I sat on my couch, turned off my phone, poured myself a drink, and toasted silently to the man who had believed in me when no one else did. I thought about what Grandpa once said, one evening when we sat on the porch and watched the sun set behind the fields. "Sometimes," he said, "family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your values. Don't let them guilt you into forgetting that." I hadn't. And now? Now it was time for them to learn that actions, even the ones you think are harmless jabs, little jokes at Thanksgiving dinners, have consequences. And I wasn't done yet. Because while they scrambled to figure out where to go, how to beg or bully their way back in, I was planning something even bigger, something permanent, something they could never undo. The 30 days passed like clockwork. I thought, for a while, they might try something desperate, some last-ditch effort to guilt-trip me, maybe even drag me into court on some flimsy pretext. After all, Emily had always been the queen of dramatics. I half expected her to show up on my doorstep, crocodile tears ready, begging for mercy. Or maybe Mom would come again, pie in hand, offering sweet words wrapped around thinly veiled threats. But they didn't. At least, not right away. At first, they tried the silent treatment. The same tactic they'd used on me 100 times when I was growing up. They acted like if they just ignored me long enough, I'd come crawling back, desperate for acceptance. They posted photos online, happy, smiling family gatherings, as if to prove to the world and themselves that they were thriving, as if I were the one missing out. I didn't bite. Then came the anger. Emily, of course, led the charge. Furious texts, snide Facebook posts, whispered campaigns among the extended family. Daniel's gone power-hungry. Daniel's selfish. Daniel's destroying the family legacy. I watched it all from a distance, unbothered. Let them talk. Words were cheap. Reality, cold, hard, legally binding reality was coming for them, whether they acknowledged it or not. When the final week hit, the tone shifted again. Desperation. Mom sent a long, rambling email about tradition and roots, and how could you do this to your own mother? Uncle Mark called twice and left voicemails full of half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. Even Evan, who hadn't spoken 2 words to me in the last year, sent a text saying, "Hey man, maybe we can work something out? No need to make it ugly." I didn't respond. They made their choices. They laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like an afterthought until the moment they realized they needed me. And I wasn't about to save them from the consequences they'd worked so hard to earn. The day before the eviction deadline, I went back to the house. I wanted to see it one last time before everything changed, before it stopped being the old, worn-out family home and became just another memory. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft purples and deep golds. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Sadder. The paint was peeling worse than ever. The porch steps sagged under their own weight. The yard, once vibrant under Grandpa's care, was overgrown and wild. I sat in my truck for a minute, taking it all in. Part of me ached, deep down, not for them, but for what the place had meant. For what it could have been if the people inside had cared half as much about the family as they did about themselves. When I finally stepped out, I wasn't surprised to find Emily waiting for me on the porch. She looked rough. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, her arms crossed tight over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together by force. "You're really going through with this," she said, her voice hollow. I didn't say anything. She took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply on the warped wood. "You know Mom has nowhere to go. Uncle Mark's broke. Evan's barely scraping by. You're throwing them out onto the street." I shrugged. "Not my problem. They're adults. They can figure it out." "You're disgusting," she spat. I smiled faintly. "You didn't think I was so disgusting when you thought you were getting a free house." Her face twisted, like she wanted to scream. Instead, she choked it back, fists trembling at her sides. "You're going to regret this," she said finally, voice shaking with rage. I met her gaze evenly. "No, I'm not." I left her standing there, stormed past her into the house, and headed straight to Grandpa's study. It was almost exactly how he had left it: old leather chair, dusty bookshelves, the faint smell of pipe tobacco lingering in the air. I closed the door behind me and opened the old desk drawer. Inside was a thick manila envelope, right where Grandpa said it would be in his letter. Inside the envelope were 2 things: the deed to the house and a notarized letter dated months before he passed. "Daniel," it read, "if you're reading this, it means they've shown their true colors. I'm sorry you have to be the one to clean up the mess, but I know you're strong enough to do it. This house doesn't belong to people who treat others like tools or punching bags. It belongs to someone who understands what family is supposed to mean. Whatever you decide to do with it, sell it, tear it down, build something new, I'm proud of you. Always have been. Love, Grandpa." I sat there for a long moment, letting the words sink in. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of Emily yelling into her phone, probably rallying the troops for one last pathetic stand. I didn't care. When I finally stood up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Mr. Hadley from the study phone. "Proceed," I said simply. The next morning, the sheriff arrived right on schedule. I didn't go to the house. I didn't need to. Mr. Hadley handled everything. The paperwork, the locks, the official notice posted on the door. By noon, they were gone. Some left with bags hastily stuffed into cars. Others called in favors, crashed on couches, scraped together what dignity they could. Emily screamed at the sheriff, threatened lawsuits, cried in the driveway. None of it mattered. It was done. The house sat empty for 3 weeks after that. I drove by once or twice just to see it. It looked almost peaceful, stripped of the chaos and bitterness that had infected it for so long. Then the bulldozers arrived. The house came down in a single day, a cloud of dust rising into the clear blue sky like a final exorcism of everything toxic that had clung to it for years. In its place, the developer, working from Grandpa's old designs, built a community center. A place for kids to play, for families to gather, for people to connect, the way families are supposed to. It was named after Grandpa, the James Whitmore Memorial Center. There's a plaque out front with his favorite quote, "Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your heart." I stood there the day it opened, hands in my pockets, watching kids run across the new playground, parents laughing and talking nearby. No bitterness, no fake smiles, no knives hidden behind backs. Real family, the kind Grandpa would have been proud of. I never saw much of the old family after that. Emily moved 2 towns over, still blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. Mom eventually found a small apartment, quiet and lonely, though she tried reaching out a few times. I didn't hate her, but I didn't open the door, either. Some wounds don't need salt poured in them, but they don't need reopening, either. As for me, I bought a little house on the edge of town with a big porch and a swing set in the backyard. I'm married now. Got a little girl who's learning how to ride a bike. Some nights, we sit on the porch, and I tell her stories about a man named Grandpa James, who built houses with his own 2 hands, who believed in kindness, who taught me that real family is earned, not inherited. She listens with big eyes, swinging her legs back and forth, asking 1,000 questions. And every time she laughs, a bright, unburdened laugh, I know Grandpa was right. Family isn't what you're born into. It's what you build, one choice at a time. And I built something better, something real, something that no amount of lies, jealousy, or cruelty could ever tear down again. The day my daughter turned 8 was the day I decided my family no longer deserved a place in my life. My name's Caleb. I'm 36, a single dad, and I own a mid-range but well-loved Italian restaurant in our small city. It's not some 5-star downtown spot, but it's mine. Built from the ground up, 1 plate of gnocchi and 1 spilled glass of wine at a time. It's been my pride for nearly a decade now, second only to my daughter, Lily. Lily is the kind of kid that makes people do a double take. Big brown eyes, gentle smile, and a laugh that always escapes before she can finish the joke. She's thoughtful in a way most adults aren't. Writes little thank you notes on sticky pads. Puts them in my apron pocket. She's been doing it since she learned how to write. Anyway, I got full custody when she was 5. Her mom, Samantha, wasn't built for motherhood. She wanted to chase her dream of becoming a travel vlogger, which somehow meant dropping Lily off and not looking back. It hurt at first. I won't pretend it didn't. But it also brought something strangely grounding. With just the 2 of us, every win felt bigger. Every birthday, every tooth lost, every macaroni drawing stuck to the fridge, it all meant more. Now, my side of the family. That's where the cracks begin to show. I have an older sister, Vanessa. She's 38. Used to be my best friend when we were kids, climbed trees together, got matching scrapes on our knees. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. Maybe it was when I got the restaurant going, and she was still working reception at a dermatology clinic. Or maybe it was Lily herself. Vanessa has no kids, but she always acted like that was her choice, and everyone else was somehow less mature for building a family. She and her husband, Grant, made decent money. They lived in a house twice the size of mine. No mortgage, no kids, just Pilates, avocado toast, and long weekends in wine country. And somehow, they always managed to make me feel like I was the one barely scraping by. Still, I tried to keep things civil, especially for Lily's sake. Every year, I invited them to her birthday, along with my parents, my cousins, even a few aunts and uncles. And every year, I got a variation of the same message. Can't make it, but send hugs, or we're out of town that weekend, sorry. I swallowed the disappointment. I told myself people get busy, that maybe next year would be different. But this year was supposed to be special. Lily had picked a tea party theme. She made hand-drawn invites, decorated them herself with glitter glue and little stickers. She wore this soft pink tulle dress we'd picked out together and insisted on setting the table herself. She even arranged sugar cubes into tiny pyramids, like real fancy people do. She waited by the door for 2 hours. Just sat there. Every time a car slowed down, she'd pop up and smooth her dress. Smile pressed on her face like she didn't want me to see it faltering. And I kept checking my phone, trying to find the words to explain why nobody was walking through the door. Eventually, she stopped asking if they were still coming. I pulled out her favorite strawberry shortcake. We lit candles. She smiled for the camera, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, I tucked her into bed and she asked in the smallest voice, "Did I do something wrong?" And I swear, my heart broke in a way it never had before. Not even when Samantha walked out. I kissed her forehead, told her no, told her she was perfect. But when I went downstairs, I just sat there, staring at all those untouched paper cups, all the unused plates, and the banner that said "Happy Birthday, Lily," like it was mocking me. I didn't say anything to the family. I didn't send angry texts. I didn't post passive-aggressive photos. I just went quiet. Exactly 1 week later, Vanessa sent a mass text to the whole family. Emma's engagement dinner, $1,800 per head. Formal attire. Venmo link below. RSVP ASAP. No apology. No mention of Lily's birthday. Not a single acknowledgement that she'd missed it, or that she'd missed every single one before that. Emma is our cousin. Sweet girl. 26, getting married to some finance bro she met at a spin class. Whatever. I wasn't mad at Emma. But the fact that Vanessa had the audacity to send that message like nothing had happened, like my daughter sitting alone in her birthday dress was nothing more than a skipped errand, that should have been enough. But then came the second message. Booked at your restaurant. Already paid. Please close for the day. We want it private. That was the moment something inside me shifted. She didn't ask. She didn't even check if the place was available. She just assumed she could buy out the restaurant like it was some hotel room, and that I'd just roll over and accommodate it. I stared at the message for a full minute. Thought about Lily sitting by the door with her little hands folded in her lap. Thought about that fake smile. The sugar cubes. The pink dress. My jaw tightened. I typed one word. Declined. No explanation. No follow-up. Just that. 2 hours later, Vanessa walked into the restaurant, heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. My afternoon crowd was winding down, just a few late lunchers sipping espresso, and I was behind the counter restocking the pastry display when I heard the door bang open. "There you are," she snapped, marching straight to me like a storm in a silk blouse. "What do you mean by declined?" I didn't flinch, just looked at her. Exactly what it sounds like. She blinked, as if stunned I hadn't immediately caved. "We paid. It's already transferred." I shrugged. "I refunded it." "You can't do that. It's non-refundable. Not when you never booked it through the official channel. No contract, no reservation. You texted. That's not how it works." She huffed, actually stamped her foot like a kid denied candy. "This is a family event, Caleb. For Emma. You're being petty." I felt something in my chest flare. "You want to talk about petty? My daughter waited in a birthday dress for 3 hours. No call. No message. And now you expect me to close shop for your engagement party like nothing happened?" Vanessa's expression flickered. For a split second, something like guilt passed through. Then it was gone. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like it was on purpose. Things happen. Things always happen when it comes to Lily." She folded her arms. "So what? This is your way of getting revenge." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The silence spoke louder than any words. Her voice rose. "You're punishing everyone over one silly day?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm holding people accountable." She opened her mouth again, but I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the middle of the lobby, furious and sputtering. My staff watched the whole thing in stunned silence. And that was just the beginning. Because Vanessa wasn't going to let this go. Not quietly. She had no idea who she was dealing with. And neither did the rest of the family. The thing about family drama is, it never explodes all at once. It builds. Quietly. It simmers under the surface like a pot on low heat. You think you've got time. You think maybe it'll cool off before it boils over. But it never does. After Vanessa stormed out of the restaurant, I figured I'd made my point. She'd overstepped. I pushed back. That should have been the end of it, right? It wasn't. The silence was deafening at first. No apology. No check-in. Not even a "hey, what happened at the restaurant?" from my parents. Just a quiet group effort to pretend none of it had occurred. I thought maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they just didn't want to take sides. But then I saw the Instagram posts. Emma's engagement dinner had gone ahead. Just not at my restaurant. They'd booked a sleek little rooftop spot across town. White drapes, twinkle lights, charcuterie boards shaped like hearts. All of it captioned with things like, "When family comes together, magic happens," and wouldn't have been possible without our amazing Vanessa. And the kicker? Emma tagged me in one of the photos. I stared at my phone for a long time. Just stared. Lily was beside me on the couch, practicing her cursive with a sparkly pink pencil. She leaned her head against my arm like she always does when she senses I'm upset. I didn't say anything, just locked the phone and set it face down. The next week, I got a voicemail from my mom. "Hi, sweetheart. Listen, I hope you're not still upset. Vanessa told us about the mix-up. It's just been such a hectic time for everyone, and I know Lily's birthday meant a lot, but we can't dwell on every little thing. Okay. Anyway, don't forget, the family beach trip is next month. We're renting the usual place. You and Lily should definitely come. Love you." Every little thing. That stuck with me. It was never "we're sorry." Never "we should have been there." Just a gentle push to let it go. Move on. Show up for the next family photo on the beach like nothing ever happened. My family had this way of smoothing over their mistakes with soft words and big smiles. If you brought up the past, you were dramatic. If you asked for accountability, you were being negative. But for Lily, I agreed to go. Not because I wanted to. Because she deserved to feel included. She talked about it for days. She remembered the sandcastle contest from last year. The late-night Esmo race. The time she saw a crab and screamed so loud the whole boardwalk stared. She asked if her cousins would be there. I didn't have the heart to tell her those same cousins didn't even text her happy birthday. The beach house was a massive 2-story rental near the dunes. All white paneling and wide decks. When we arrived, Vanessa and Grant were already there, drinks in hand, sunglasses on, looking like a magazine ad. My parents were seated in those striped folding chairs they always bring, and a few other relatives were gathered around the grill, laughing at some inside joke I was never part of. Lily ran ahead, a blur of pink shorts and bare feet, calling out greetings. She didn't notice the way some of them only half-waved back. I followed with our bags, forced a smile, and told myself to get through the weekend. That night, we did hot dogs and burgers. The kids watched a movie upstairs while the adults played cards on the porch. I stayed mostly quiet, just listened. And that's when I started noticing things. The way Vanessa steered every conversation back to herself. The way my parents nodded along, proud of her stories, but barely asked me a single question. At one point, she brought up her work gala, and my mom clapped her hands and said, "We're so proud of you, honey. You really have your life together." That stung more than I wanted it to. The next day, I took Lily out for ice cream, just the two of us. We walked the boardwalk, got sticky hands, watched some street performer do magic tricks. I let her get a second scoop. She was glowing. When we got back, everyone was gathered on the deck. Vanessa stood in the center, beaming. She held up a small velvet box and announced, "Grant and I have news." People started clapping before she even opened it. She pulled out a tiny white pair of baby shoes. My stomach dropped. "I'm pregnant," she said. Finally, there was a chorus of cheers. My mom actually teared up. My dad hugged her like she'd just won the lottery. It was like the air itself shifted. Suddenly, she was the golden child again, but now with a future grandbaby to seal the deal. And me? I was invisible. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some acknowledgement that Lily existed. That their other grandchild was standing right there, holding my hand. But all I got was a side glance and a weak, "Oh, and of course Lily will be a great cousin." The rest of the evening was a blur. They toasted to Vanessa. They made plans for the baby shower. My mom started rambling about nursery colors. My dad offered to help renovate the guest room into a nursery. No one even asked Lily if she wanted more juice. That night, I sat alone on the balcony after everyone went to bed. Lily was asleep beside me, curled under a blanket, her cheeks sunburnt and her lips slightly sticky from marshmallows. I watched the waves in silence, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them keep doing this to her. Not again. Not for the next birthday. Not for the next family trip. I was done playing nice. But the real breaking point? That came the following morning. We'd agreed to take a big group photo on the beach. Vanessa insisted on it. Everyone dressed in coordinated whites and blues. Lily wore her favorite sundress, yellow with little daisies. I told her she looked like sunshine. As we all gathered near the dunes, a photographer my uncle hired started directing us. Okay, let's do a big family shot first. Parents, siblings, kids, all of you. We arranged ourselves. I stood with Lily in front of me, my hands on her shoulders. And then Vanessa stepped in. Actually, can we just get the immediate family for this one first? Like, Mom, Dad, me, Grant. You know, blood family. She said it so casually. Like it didn't mean anything. Like it was just for symmetry. I stared at her. Then I looked at my mom. And she looked away. No one said anything. The photographer hesitated. Sure. Whatever you want. Lily tugged my sleeve, confused. Why are we moving, Daddy? I crouched beside her. Swallowed the knot in my throat. They just want one without us, sweetie. It's okay. But I'm family, she said quietly. And in that moment, I think something inside me shattered. Because she was family. She was my daughter. The only good thing to come out of a broken marriage. The reason I worked 12-hour shifts. The reason I kept going when everything else fell apart. And these people, the ones who were supposed to love her unconditionally, were treating her like an extra, like a +1. I stood up, walked right over to the camera, and said, "We're done." Everyone turned. Vanessa frowned. "What? We're done?" I repeated. "Lily and I are leaving. You can take all the pictures you want without us." My mom stood up, panicked. "Caleb, don't make a scene." "No," I said louder this time. "I'm not making a scene. I'm making a choice." Vanessa scoffed. "Oh, come on. Don't be childish." I laughed. Actually laughed. Childish. You excluded my daughter from a birthday, from a dinner, and now from a photo. She's 8, Vanessa. What's your excuse? Silence. Real silence this time. No one moved. No one defended me. Not even my dad. I turned to Lily, picked her up, and said, "Let's go get pancakes." She nodded, wrapping her arms around my neck. As we walked away, I heard Vanessa mutter something behind us. Couldn't quite make it out. But I didn't care. Because I was done waiting for this family to love us properly. And I had no idea the real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. Lily didn't say a word on the drive home. She sat in the back seat with her knees hugged to her chest, chin resting on them, watching the blurred trees slip by outside the window. I checked the rearview mirror more times than I could count. Her face didn't change once. No tears. No questions. Just silence. The kind that clings to you. When we got home, I made her favorite breakfast for dinner, banana pancakes with extra chocolate chips and whipped cream shaped into a smiley face. She picked at it for a few minutes before finally asking, "Why doesn't Aunt Vanessa like me?" I sat down across from her, completely still. I'd practiced how to answer this in my head on the drive. Tried to word it like a grown-up. Tried to soften the edges. But looking into her eyes, all that effort just melted. "She doesn't not like you, sweetheart," I said carefully. "She just doesn't always understand how to treat people the right way." Lily stared at her plate. "She treats Emma nice. And everyone else." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, she does. But that's not because of anything you did. You've never done anything wrong." She looked up, her voice so small it nearly broke me. "I don't think I want to see them anymore." That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. The weeks after the beach trip were quiet. Too quiet. No one reached out. Not to me. Not to Lily. No check-in. No, "Are you okay?" Not even from my parents. You'd think if a family member stormed off mid-vacation, someone would call. But in our family, silence was the punishment. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They just erased you from the picture. And truthfully, that hurt more. I started second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? Had I made it worse than it was? Should I have stayed quiet for Lily's sake? It didn't help that the restaurant was struggling. We were still recovering from a slow spring, and now with summer ending, the tourist crowd was thinning out. My manager, Tony, quietly told me we might need to cut back staff hours. A couple suppliers were late on invoices, and the oven in the back kept shorting out. The little things started piling up. One night after closing, I stayed late doing inventory alone. The dining room was dark, chairs flipped on tables, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound in the place. I sat at the corner booth where Lily and I usually shared lunch on Saturdays and just stared at the reservation book. Empty pages. Blank squares. I felt something collapse inside me. Like all the strength I'd been pretending to have finally caved. That was the night I cried. Not a single tear, not a quiet sniffle, but full-on, shoulders shaking, gut-wrenching crying. The kind of cry you try to bury under work and bills and daily routines, but it finds its way through anyway. I buried my face in my hands and let it come. No one was there to see. No one would have cared if they had. I didn't cry because of Vanessa. I cried because I realized I had spent years chasing the approval of people who only showed up when it was convenient. I'd bent over backwards trying to prove I was a good father, a good son, a good brother. And for what? So they could treat my daughter like a footnote? No, no more. That night, I pulled out my phone and started going through my contacts. One by one, I deleted the names that hadn't texted Lily happy birthday, the ones that didn't reach out after the beach trip, my cousin who shared Vanessa's Instagram post but never once sent Lily a card. Gone. My uncle who always meant to come by but somehow never had the time. Gone. It was cleansing. When I got to my mom's number, I hesitated, but only for a second. Then I deleted hers too. I didn't tell Lily any of this. I just let things shift naturally. I started showing up more. Not just physically, but emotionally. I listened more. I took her to the bookstore every weekend and let her pick out whatever she wanted. We started volunteering at the animal shelter on Sundays. We got caught in a rainstorm one afternoon, and instead of rushing home, we danced in it like lunatics. I poured everything I had into being her safe place. And slowly, I started to feel okay again. Funny thing about hitting rock bottom, it gives you something to push against. That fall, the restaurant got a small feature in a local magazine. One of our regulars had written in about our house-made pesto and the family warmth of our dining room. A photographer came in, took some cozy photos of the place, and Lily even got her picture in the article, grinning proudly in her apron next to a tray of garlic knots. The piece blew up more than I expected. Suddenly, we had new faces walking through the doors every weekend. Locals, tourists, even a couple food bloggers. Word of mouth picked up. Our weekend brunch started selling out. I hired back the staff I'd been afraid to let go. Tony joked that we should name a dish after the article, so we did. The Lily Special. French toast with strawberries and extra whipped cream. Lily beamed every time someone ordered it. And then came the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing the month's invoices when my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Caleb, a familiar voice asked. I paused. Vanessa? A beat of silence. Yeah. Hi. My stomach twisted. I hadn't heard her voice in over 2 months. What do you want? I asked flatly. She cleared her throat. Listen, I know things got tense after the beach trip, but I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe we could talk. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Talk about what exactly? She gave a little laugh. Forced. I don't know. Maybe reconnect. There's going to be a baby shower next month. Thought you and Lily might want to come. I didn't answer. And, she added quickly, I was hoping we could do the shower at your restaurant. I laughed before I could stop myself. Wow, you really just went for it, huh? She bristled. Excuse me. Vanessa, you haven't spoken to me or Lily in months. And now you want to throw a baby shower at the place you screamed in the lobby of. That was a moment, Caleb. I was stressed. And emotional. I thought we were past that. No, you thought we could skip past it. There's a difference. Another beat of silence. Then she said something that froze me in place. Well, it's already been paid. Grant sent the deposit through your site this morning. And Mom sent out the invites. So, it's kind of locked in. I sat up straight. You booked it without asking me. I figured you'd come around. I mean, you're not going to make a pregnant woman find a new venue, are you? There it was. The entitlement. The assumption. The way she treated me like a backup plan that would always say yes. I'll refund the payment, I said coldly. You wouldn't dare, she snapped. I already did that once, remember? Don't be vindictive, Caleb. I laughed again. I'm not. I'm protecting my peace. And I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from her. A screenshot of the baby shower group text. The whole family. My name included at the top. Then a single message under it. He's refusing to host. After everything. Can you believe this? That's when I knew what was coming. The gossip. The backlash. The whisper campaigns. But this time I was ready. Because I wasn't the same person I was a few months ago. I had Lily. I had my restaurant. I had customers who treated us like family more than my own blood ever had. I had something better than revenge. I had power. Real power. And I hadn't even used it yet. I didn't respond to Vanessa's group text. Not to her smug screenshot. Not to the guilt-laced caption. Not even to the handful of wow reactions from the family members who still pretended they didn't know what happened back in July. Instead, I turned off my phone, brewed a cup of coffee, and walked out onto the back patio. Lily was out there already, sprawled on a blanket with her sketchbook, drawing little characters she'd invented, half princess, half space explorer, with rocket boots and glittery crowns. She looked up, squinting at me in the late afternoon sun. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than I've been in a while," I said, sitting beside her. She nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to her drawing. That was the thing about Lily. She didn't need long speeches or dramatic declarations. She just needed presence, time, safety. I'd spent too long trying to create that despite my family. Now, I was ready to create it without them. But first, I had a few things to take care of. The next morning, I called Tony into the office before the lunch rush. "Close the restaurant on the 22nd, I said, flipping open the scheduling calendar. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? That's a Saturday. We've got 5 reservations in already. I'll personally refund each of them and comp them a free dessert voucher for the inconvenience." He leaned on the edge of the desk. "What's going on?" I met his eyes. "Family wants to host an event here. I'm going to let them think they still are." He stared at me for a beat, then grinned. "You evil, beautiful man," he said, and clapped me on the shoulder. The plan was simple. Let Vanessa walk herself into the trap. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing, not in some cloak and dagger, theatrical way. Just small, intentional steps. Every move designed to look like I wasn't planning anything at all. First, I let the baby shower booking stay live on the site. Technically, Grant had sent a deposit, but through the general event form, not a confirmed contract. That gave me a legal and moral out, and I made sure to keep every detail in writing. A simple, professional email went out to him confirming receipt and stating, "Date not finalized until venue contract is signed. Pending." He never responded. Second, I got in touch with my cousin Ryan. Ryan was the only relative I hadn't cut off after the beach incident. He was younger, mid-20s, kind of a black sheep. He worked freelance video editing gigs, rode a beat-up motorcycle, and showed up to every family function in band t-shirts. The kind of guy the aunts whispered about, but secretly liked more than they'd admit. Ryan had seen through Vanessa years ago, called her CEO of fake smiles. He also happened to owe me a favor. I'd helped him land a catering job once when he was broke. He never forgot it. "Yo," he said when I called. "You want me to fake crash their baby shower and confess a secret pregnancy? Because I will." I laughed. "Not quite, but I do need your camera." "Go on." I explained the plan. Not all of it, just enough to make him smirk. "You got it," he said. "And Caleb?" "Yeah. Get M." Third, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I emailed a local food journalist. Back when the restaurant was first getting off the ground, I'd sent a few press releases, hoping for a little attention. Most never replied. But Jules Tran had. She ran a mid-sized blog called Bite and Bright. Smart, sharp reviews, no fluff. Her write-up had brought in a solid chunk of our early clientele. I sent a short message. "Hey Jules, been a while. If you're free on the 22nd, I'd love to invite you to witness something memorable. Can't say more yet. Just trust me, it's worth the trip. Caleb." She replied 6 minutes later. "Now I'm curious. I'll be there." Then came the props. I called in a few favors from friends in the business, florists, bakers, even a local party planner I'd catered events for in the past. I gave them a cover story. I needed to simulate a high-end baby shower for a photography portfolio. I'd pay, of course, but it didn't need to be real, just look real. Beautiful but hollow. Everything from the outside would seem exactly as Vanessa envisioned it. Gold-trimmed plates, sugar-dusted pastries, hand-calligraphed name tags. I even let her choose the color scheme when she sent me a snotty, "Since you're still hosting this," email with 4 Pinterest boards attached. Rose gold and sage green. Classic. Safe. I confirmed the details with a cheerful "of course" and kept the tone polite. Professional. Accommodating. Let them think they'd won. And still, not a word from my parents. That part stung, but it also clarified something for me. They weren't neutral. They weren't trying not to pick sides. They were comfortable being silent as long as Vanessa stayed comfortable being loud. Their silence was their choice. I wouldn't let them forget that. Finally, the last piece of the setup fell into place the night before the 22nd. Lily and I sat on the floor of our living room with markers, and craft paper. I told her we were making decorations for a surprise at the restaurant. She didn't ask too many questions, just trusted me. We made signs together, cut out little hearts, wrote messages in big block letters. She drew doodles on the corners. We laughed more than we had in weeks. When I tucked her in that night, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "I like when it's just us." I stayed by her bed for a while, watching her sleep. Then I opened my laptop and uploaded one file. A simple, 3-minute compilation. A series of clips I'd quietly taken over the last year. Moments of Lily sitting alone at her birthday table, waving at the door, checking the clock. A shot of the untouched cake. One of her carefully setting the napkins herself. Then, a few snapshots from the beach trip. Lily in her daisy sundress. Her smile fading as we're asked to move out of the photo. My hand on her shoulder. Her confused face. I added one final photo. Lily holding a drawing she made of a family. 3 stick figures. Her, me, and a heart above our heads. I titled the video, "The Invisible Child," and I set it to private. For now. The morning of the 22nd, I arrived at the restaurant early. Tony was already there, polishing glasses. Ryan came in around 9, setting up cameras with hidden tripods, discreet and unobtrusive. Jules showed up an hour later with a small notepad and a raised eyebrow. "This is an event," she said, glancing at the flower arrangements. "But what am I looking for?" I smiled. "Just wait." At exactly 1:06 p.m., Vanessa walked in. She looked radiant in a fitted ivory maternity dress, with soft waves in her hair and a smug glint in her eyes. Grant trailed behind her, carrying a box of party favors. "Oh," she said, looking around. "You did go all out." I nodded. Wouldn't want to disappoint. Guests trickled in. My mom, my dad, aunts, cousins. About 20 people total. Laughter echoed. Champagne poured. The playlist was soft jazz and baby-themed pop covers. Vanessa took her throne, an oversized plush chair draped in pastel tulle, and began accepting compliments like a queen at court. Everything was perfect. On the surface, what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that every single element of this event had been controlled. Every chair, every plate, every flower, every camera angle, and none of it was for them. The baby shower unfolded exactly the way Vanessa had envisioned, which was perfect because it made the reveal all the more satisfying. By 2:30 p.m., the room was humming with laughter and clinking glasses. The cake had been cut. The gifts, luxury strollers, organic diaper subscriptions, hand-stitched monogrammed blankets, were stacked like trophies at her feet. Vanessa was glowing with smugness, surrounded by half a dozen women fawning over her. At one point, I saw my mom and dad in the corner, sipping from flutes of sparkling cider. They looked proud, content, as if this, Vanessa in her throne, center of the universe, was the natural order of things. Lily was upstairs, safe in my office. She had a little art station I'd set up, a few snacks, and headphones with one of her favorite movies. She didn't need to be in the room for this. Not yet. At exactly 2:47, I stepped onto the small stage near the back of the room. It was just a raised platform we used for live music on weekends. Today, it held a microphone, a mounted TV, and a discreetly hidden laptop. I tapped the mic gently. "Hi, everyone. Sorry to interrupt." The room quieted. Vanessa turned toward me, blinking. "Oh, are we doing toasts now?" "Something like that," I said, smiling politely. I saw Ryan in the corner, camera rolling. "I just want to take a quick moment," I continued, "to thank you all for coming today, and to say, truly, it's been a pleasure hosting you." A few nods, smiles. Someone clapped politely. "But before we continue," I said, "I thought we'd take a quick look at something. A short video. Only a few minutes." I gestured to the screen behind me. Vanessa tilted her head. "What video?" I didn't answer. I just tapped the laptop. The screen lit up. It opened with soft piano music and a date in the corner. July 12th, Lily's 8th birthday. The first clip played. Lily, in her birthday dress, adjusting her little handmade banner, smoothing her curls nervously. The next clip showed her sitting by the door, looking out the window, legs swinging. Clip after clip rolled, her checking the time. Her staring at the empty driveway. The cake sitting untouched. A quiet sob echoed from the speakers. Her own voice, almost inaudible. "Maybe they're just late." Then came a photo of the cake. Still whole. A pink candle unlit. Then the next scene, the beach house. A wide shot of the group gathered on the sand. Everyone in white and blue. Vanessa standing in the center. Then the soundbite. Clear, crisp. Actually, can we just get the immediate family for this one first? Like, Mom, Dad, me, Grant. A still frame of Lily's confused face followed. Then the image of her walking away, hand in mine. Finally, the last photo appeared. Lily, alone on her bunk bed, drawing a picture. 3 stick figures. Her, me, and a heart. Then the title faded in. The Invisible Child. Silence. No music. No narration. Just a white screen and the quiet hum of the AC vent in the room. I stepped back up to the mic. Some of you may not have realized, I said calmly, how many times this little girl was overlooked, forgotten, treated like she didn't exist. Not just once, not just on her birthday, but again and again. I scanned the room. Several people looked stunned. A few looked away. My mother's hand was covering her mouth. My father looked frozen. Lily is 8 years old. I continued. She is smart. She is kind. She made birthday invitations by hand and waited in her dress for 3 hours. No one showed, and no one apologized. I turned to Vanessa. Her face was unreadable, lips slightly parted, color drained. Then we were told we weren't immediate family at a photo shoot we paid part of the rental for. There was a sharp inhale somewhere near the back. I don't need sympathy, I said, and neither does Lily. We needed presence. We needed acknowledgement. And what we got was silence. I paused, let it sit. Until today, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a slim envelope. Walked toward Vanessa. Her eyes narrowed. What's this? She asked. I handed it to her. Your invoice. Full catering costs, venue fee, staffing, and media production. She opened it. Her eyebrows flew up. You're charging me? I gave you the courtesy of pretending this was an event you deserved. I figured the least you could do was pay for it. She blinked rapidly. Caleb, you can't be serious. This is family. I nodded. Exactly. That's what makes it so painful. She tossed the envelope on the table. You are unbelievable. You really hijacked my baby shower to guilt trip everyone. No, I said evenly. I hijacked it to tell the truth, and to make sure my daughter never again feels like she has to earn the love of people who were supposed to give it freely. Grant finally spoke, voice low. This is out of line, man. I turned to him. You paid a deposit. You didn't sign a contract. I kept the event live to honor your booking, but I'm under no legal obligation to waive the full costs. You want to fight it, you can. I have everything in writing. Vanessa was fuming now. You think anyone's going to come back here after this? You think humiliating your family in front of everyone is going to help your little restaurant? I smiled gently. You're right. I turned to the crowd. I don't expect everyone to understand or approve. But if even one person here sees Lily a little differently now, if even one of you chooses not to be silent next time, you're welcome at my table. If not, well, then I guess this restaurant just got a little quieter. I walked off the stage. The silence was deafening. And then, Ryan clapped. Slow, deliberate. Then Jules. Then a couple of others. By the time I reached the kitchen, half the room was applauding. The other half was staring holes into their napkins. I didn't care either way, because Lily was waiting for me upstairs. When I walked into the office, she looked up from her drawing. All done. I nodded. All done. Can I come down now? Soon, I said. Just need to clear a few things. That night, after the event, I posted the video on the restaurant's official page. Captioned it with, not all families are created equal, but some truths deserve to be told. It went viral. Within 24 hours, it had over 200,000 views. People flooded the comments. Parents, teachers, even strangers, sharing stories of kids who'd been treated like afterthoughts. Orders at the restaurant tripled. We had to set up a waiting list. Customers asked to meet Lily. Some brought her little cards, toys, even thank you notes. And as for the family, my parents showed up a week later. They didn't make it past the front door. Tony stopped them gently and said, reservations only. Vanessa tried calling. I blocked her. Aunt Mel emailed. I never opened it. I had nothing left to say. Some bridges don't burn. They rot. And the only way forward is without them. Lily and I went on a weekend trip shortly after. Just the two of us. Mountains. Cozy cabin. Hot cocoa. She brought her sketchbook and started drawing new characters. One of them looked suspiciously like me, with a chef's hat and a shield. What's that? I asked. She grinned. It's a knight. He protects the people who matter. I looked out at the pine trees, the sky turning pink with dusk. I like him, I said. We sat in silence for a while. Then she looked at me and said, "Are we going to be okay now?" I nodded. "We already are." And that was the last time I ever let someone treat my daughter like she was invisible. My name is Rowan Hale. I'm 29, and 10 years ago my parents stopped answering my calls because I wouldn't sign the dotted line that would have made my future belong to them. I still remember the color of the sky that afternoon. Flat, midsummer gray, as my dad slid a pen across our chipped kitchen table and said I could either be part of the team or learn the lesson life wasn't kind enough to teach me yet. I was 19, skinny, and scared of everything except letting someone else carry my name like a leash. Mom folded her arms, quiet the way a door is quiet right before it slams. "We can't keep helping you if you're going to keep making it hard," she said, which sounded like concern but felt like a verdict. I slid the pen back. Dad stood. And just like that, 10 years of birthdays, holidays, and "we're doing what's best for you" evaporated into an ice-cold silence. When the front door shut behind me, I heard the lock turn with a click I've thought about every day since. If you asked anyone in my town to describe the Hale family back then, they'd use words like driven and close-knit, as if those were synonyms for tight-fisted and single-lane. My father, Greg, loved to remind people he was the first in his line to build something from scratch. He started as a contractor swinging a hammer and grew that into a small property company with a polished website and steel letters on a rented office wall. The thing is, he never learned the difference between holding people to a standard and holding people by the throat. My mother, Lila, could turn any conversation into a test. "How hard are you working? What's next? When will it be bigger?" She dressed her ambition in soft sweaters and matching earrings, but it was just my father's voice delivered with a smile. My younger sister, Harper, learned early how to catch their light and reflect it back. She was the pretty one with soft hair and the laugh that made adults melt. When she said she wanted something, it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like the world catching up to her schedule. Growing up, help in our house had fine print. When Dad paid for something, he expected regular progress reports, gratitude stated aloud, and a willingness to step in line when called. When Mom supported you, it came with reminders about optics, what people would think if you didn't do X or if you insisted on Y. I learned to watch how much space I took up at the table, how much air my sentences used. Harper never had to learn any of that. She stretched, yawned, and the room widened to fit. The pen my father slid across the table that afternoon was for a loan he wanted me to take out in the family's name. He had a plan. He said I would be the student on paper, the leverage in practice. He would buy 2 small rentals near campus using my clean credit and my enrollment status to qualify for some program he'd learned about from a guy at Rotary. My name would be on everything, so the banks would like the story, but he'd handle the details. All I had to do was sign, smile, and not ask questions. The numbers he drew in my notebook looked confident, the arrows clear, the boxes tidy. But every instinct in me knotted up. I'd seen enough of his plans to know how they worked. The wins were his, the risks were mine, and any fallout became a lecture about loyalty. "I want to do this on my own," I said, and for a second my father stared at me like the words were in a language he didn't recognize. Then he laughed. Not the whole belly, just the part that says what a ridiculous idea. "There's no such thing," he told me, tapping the page with the back of the pen. "Everybody is on somebody's shoulders. You want to pretend otherwise, you can go rent your independence somewhere and see how long before it comes due." Mom's mouth folded into that small, disbelieving smile. Harper, 17 then and already rehearsing for a life where she never had to carry a wallet, watched me with a kind of polite pity, like I'd dropped a tray in a crowded cafe and she was too well-bred to clap. When I left, I had a backpack, a used laptop that creaked when it opened, and a mix of anger and helium inside my ribs. I got a job that paid less than everything cost. Then I got another one for nights and weekends. People talk like hard work is noble. Sometimes it's just the only way to keep the lights on. But you learn things in fluorescent kitchens and loading docks. You learn how to read faces and invoices, how to stack boxes so they don't topple, how to call a stranger sir even when he's wrong, and how to stretch a mistake into a lesson before it eats your paycheck. Most of all, you learn the difference between someone investing in you and someone investing in your obedience. That difference became my religion. The first year was the loudest in my head. Every time I wanted to quit, I saw my father's hand pushing a glass across a table with that little flourish he thinks is charm. Every time I wanted to give in and call home, I pictured my mother composing a speech about how sometimes love looks like saying, "We told you so." I didn't attend Thanksgiving that year. No one noticed. Or if they did, they turned it into a parable about choices. Harper posted photos with captions about family and gratitude and her favorite pie. I double-shifted and fell asleep to the sound of my upstairs neighbor's TV. It's funny what you can get used to when you've decided embarrassment is cheaper than debt. 2 years in, I got my first good break. It didn't look like luck. It looked like an older man at the back of a code boot camp with a quiet voice and a scar along his chin saying he needed someone to help him digitize his wife's small business records. He paid by the hour, less than he should have, more than I could refuse, and in exchange I got access to a problem I didn't know I loved solving. Numbers can be a language. Paperwork can be a story. If you stare long enough, patterns appear, and with a little care, those patterns can become policies that stop people from bleeding money through invisible cuts. After that, there were more small businesses. Then there was a broker who liked how I documented things. Then there was a landlord who liked how I didn't flinch when he put a pile of mismatched lease agreements on a table and said, "Can you make it make sense?" I learned zoning maps and inspection schedules like they were puzzles. I learned to never be the loudest person in a room where money was changing directions. People will tell you that success heals old wounds. It doesn't. It covers them. It rewraps them in something tasteful. It distracts you. The feelings still live there, chewing slowly. The way my father's face sharpened when I said no, the way my mother looked past me as if I were a hallway, not a son, the way Harper tilted her head when she was deciding whether to be kind or funny at my expense. When checks started coming to my mailbox with commas inside them, I caught myself wanting to send a photo to a number that never answered. I didn't. Instead, I bought silence. The quiet you get when your rent is paid on time and your car starts without argument. I stacked that quiet until it felt like a floor. Then I learned how to buy something else. Time. I didn't go home for 9 years. Not once. If you asked why, I'd give a practical answer. Schedules, flights, a project. But the truth is simpler. It's hard to enter a house where your absence has been edited into a choice that made everyone else's life easier. I heard about Harper through other people's photos. She graduated in a white dress and held roses. She started working with our mother at a boutique firm that helps curate events for donors and development causes. The caption said she was building connections. I recognized that phrase. In my family, it always meant borrowing ladders without asking who owned them. Then, a year ago, a heavy envelope arrived at the forwarding address I use for most of my mail. It had my name written in that rounded, teacherly script my mother uses for Christmas tags. Inside was a save-the-date card for Harper's wedding. The paper was thick enough to feel like it came with instructions. The front had a photo of my sister and a man with shoulders that belonged to a suit. He had that bland, competent look of someone who never felt the edge of a month in his entire life. The back had a date, a location, and a line that said, "It would mean the world to have family there." No one's number was included. No note. Just the assumption that if you mailed the moon, it would show up on your porch and say thank you. I set the card on my counter and stared at the venue's name. I knew it. Not socially. Professionally. The building had changed hands 3 times in 6 years and leaked money every season like a roof collects leaves. Each owner believed the previous owner's story. That the place was special, that weddings done there felt cinematic, that people would pay extra just to say their photos happened under those rafters. The problem was simpler. The bookings were inconsistent, the township was prickly about parking, and the main hall's electrical system was a patchwork of temporary fixes. It needed someone to stop believing its myth long enough to fix its bones. I had looked at it, once early on. It wasn't the right time. But I remembered the smell of the wood, the way the lights softened along the brick in late afternoon. Some places have a heartbeat, even when they limp. Harper's invitation sat on my counter for 2 weeks. I told myself I wasn't going. I told myself I was too old to audition for a role I didn't want. Then I had a week where nothing seemed to fit. The meetings were fine. The money was fine. The emails had the tone of people who wanted to be pleased. But every night I went home and the silence felt borrowed again, not bought. I'm not proud of what I did next. I typed my sister's name into social media and scrolled through her life like a stranger. Engagement photos on a dock. Coffee in the mornings with captions about this season. A ring that could pay for a small used car. And in the comments, my mother telling her how proud she was, how grown, how beautiful, how everything we always dreamed. The "we" hooked me in the ribs like a question mark. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman with a cordial voice from the venue asked if I might be interested in consulting. They'd heard my name from a planner whose friend had worked with me on another project. "We're trying to get through a busy summer," she said, "and our margins keep disappearing." I told her I had a little time. We scheduled a visit. Walking back into that space felt like stepping into a memory someone else kept watered. The main hall was warm, the air faintly sweet from last night's flowers, and half the staff were working with the nervous energy of people who love what they do even as they know they could do it better with a few less fires. The owner, a man in his late 50s with a polite smile and tired eyes, shook my hand like he wanted to believe in somebody again. We walked the hall. I asked questions. I took notes. I listened to the way the floorboards talked back. By the time we reached the overlook where couples take photos at sunset, I had a list in my head that turned into a plan on paper later that night. I won't lie and say it wasn't a kind of poetry when the work became something else. The owner hinted he might be open to a partnership. A month later, after we'd swapped spreadsheets and quiet worries and we'd both had a blunt conversation with the township about parking, he said the other thing aloud. If the right person wanted to take this on fully, I'd sell. Deals like that are less about numbers than trust. You're taking responsibility for somebody's letters and somebody's weekends and the headaches that can't be logged. I told him I only do it if I can actually fix what's broken. He nodded like a man who wanted to sleep through the night more than he wanted to win an argument. We shook hands. We drew up contracts with more pages than a short book. It wasn't simple. It wasn't cheap. But sometimes life hands you a chance to put your fingerprints on a place where other people make their happiest decisions. And if you're careful, you can make the building strong enough to hold them. Which is how I ended up with a save the date on my counter and a set of keys in my pocket to the very hall my sister had picked for her big day. The irony tasted so sharp it almost made me laugh. I didn't. Instead, I sat with it until it became something heavier and more useful. It wasn't revenge. Not then. It was stewardship. It was work. But it was also a door that hadn't existed before. The chance to show up on my own terms, without asking permission from people who taught me that love required proof of obedience. I RSVP'd yes, online with the same steady hands I used to sign a wire. I didn't hear from my parents beforehand. Not a text. Not a looking forward to seeing you. If anything, I could feel them writing the story in their heads. Rowan, the wandering older brother, surfaces for a free meal and a photo while the real family celebrates a real accomplishment. I let them have their story. I finished a late-night walkthrough 2 weeks before the wedding and stood in the empty hall alone. The floors gleamed. The pendant lights hummed. A storm knocked at the roof like polite knuckles. I thought about my father's pen on our kitchen table. I thought about my mother's silence, her tilted head when she was deciding whether to rescind or deliver approval. I thought about Harper's easy smile and the comfort of an aisle built just for her. The morning of the wedding, I woke before my alarm. My suit hung from the closet door like a promise I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I drove slowly. There's a particular feeling when you approach a building that belongs to you in one way and to everyone else in another. I parked around back out of habit and walked through the service entrance, nodding to the staff. The on-site manager, who knows me by a different title than owner on busy days, gave me a quick update about the schedule, the weather, the decorator's last-minute request for more candles. "You staying for the ceremony?" she asked. I shrugged. "I'm family," I said, and the word felt both fragile and sharp, like glass. I texted the number on Harper's invitation to let them know I'd arrived. A perk of being the building's boss is that you can make sure the people you want safe are safe. 20 minutes later, I walked around the side corridor toward the family suite, passing staff ferrying bouquets like treasure. I hesitated at the door and listened. Laughter, the kind that swirls around names. I knocked, and when Mom opened the door, the first thing she did was glance at my shoes, then my tie, then the space over my shoulder as if I might have brought responsibility along like a date. "Rowan," she said finally, and inside my name was a small astonishment. followed by the calculation of what it would mean. Harper looked perfect. She really did. I say that without bitterness. Some people are built for center stage and don't abuse it. She walked to me in a cloud of tulle and hugged me lightly so her makeup wouldn't argue. "You made it," she said. "Of course," I answered, and then the room arranged itself around me into the old pattern. Mom asking logistics questions as if that were affection. Dad hovering in the background the way he does when he's deciding whether to offer wisdom or a wager. He waited until other people's attention shifted and then drifted closer. "Big day," he said, as if he weren't assessing me like a fixture. His eyes skimmed over my suit to my watch, then to the window, as if the view might grade me. "How are you, son?" The word son had edges. I told him I was well and asked him the same. He gave a thumbs up that meant nothing and everything. Then someone called for photos, and the moment broke. If you've ever been near a wedding, you know the hours before the ceremony are a machine. Everyone's heart strapped to a schedule. I slipped out of the family suite and let the day roll. There were hugs and smiles that felt like souvenirs I didn't know where to put. There was the photographer's bright voice, the string quartet rehearsing, the caterer's controlled panic about desserts. I lurked where staff lurk, in the places guests never see. A few of the people I employ nodded at me in that private way that says we are aligned without saying why. I kept my role quiet because some truths work best at the right temperature. The ceremony was beautiful. I stood toward the back and listened to vows about choosing each other every day. I watched my mother's face fold and unfold like a sail. I watched my father blink against feelings he considers unproductive. When they kissed, the room exhaled. Confetti clicked softly against the floorboards I'd fought to seal last fall. The band eased into something hopeful. People clapped. For a second I forgot every history between us and let the sweetness be real. Then the crowd swelled toward cocktails and habit returned. I checked the flow, the bottlenecks, the way the staff moved like practiced dancers around corners that used to pinch. None of them needed me. That might have been the nicest thing anyone had ever given me. Dinner started under the pendant lights with a clink of silverware and the way joy concentrates in the space between plates. I took my assigned seat at a corner table, third row, not family, not exile, close enough to be in the photos if someone wanted a wide angle, far enough to be cropped. Harper and her new husband looked deliriously tired, which is the correct way to look when you've been busy promising your life to someone. During the salad course, Dad stood to circulate like a mayor. I watched him lean into conversations, hand on shoulder, smile calibrated to suggest he has been benevolent all along. When he reached my table, he rested his palm against the back of my chair and said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear, "There he is, our world traveler." People laughed the kind of laugh that signals good faith. He leaned closer. "You still renting, Rowan? You keeping the dream nimble?" His mouth smiled. His eyes kept score. I could feel the room shift by a degree, curiosity tilting toward us like flowers toward light. Mom, 2 tables away, looked over just in time to offer a smile that was not a rescue. Harper was laughing at something a friend said, unaware. The band softened into a song that left more space for voices. My father swirled his wine like punctuation and waited for my answer. I could have told him something harmless. I could have nodded and let his story about me slide into place, frictionless. Instead, I slid my hand into my jacket pocket and felt cold metal shaped like a question I've been carrying for weeks. I turned the key ring against my palm until the edges stopped feeling like a secret and started feeling like a choice. Then I stood up slowly, and the scrape of my chair against the floor made a sound that brought 3 more faces around. And before I could decide how to deliver the sentence that had been living under my tongue since spring, my father lifted his glass, eyes bright with that familiar, polished smirk, and said, "Still renting, huh?" My dad's voice carried just far enough that a few people chuckled politely, not sure if it was a joke or a jab. He loved that gray zone, where cruelty could be dressed as humor. His glass hovered in the air like a gavel. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sat back down, sliding the keys deeper into my pocket. The moment wasn't ripe yet. He smirked, as if my silence proved his point, and turned to the man across the table. Rowan always had, how do you put it, a free spirit. He chuckled. Never wanted to do the hard work. Likes to keep things flexible. Rent one place, rent another. No roots, no stability. But hey, some people are just built that way. The man nodded awkwardly, his fork pausing over his plate. The tension at the table thickened, but Dad basked in it. He leaned back, draping his arm over his chair. Harper, though, he continued loudly, she's different. Solid. Reliable. Always had a plan, always moving forward. Now look at her. Married, stable, beautiful home waiting for her. He raised his glass toward Harper, who smiled uncertainly, probably too busy enjoying her night to parse the undertones. I could feel the same old script unfolding, the one I'd heard since I was a kid. Me, the wandering disappointment. Harper, the golden child. Dad, the wise narrator casting the roles. My mother, across the room, caught my eye. She gave a faint smile and tilted her head, the same gesture she used when I was 10 and brought home a B+ on a test. That "don't embarrass us" look, the one that asked me to accept the role they'd assigned. The table buzzed softly with conversations resuming, but my father wasn't done. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough that it felt intimate while still being audible to the people around us. You know, Rowan, we were worried about you. You're not getting any younger. No wife, no kids, no home. What are you working toward, really? His tone was coated in fake concern, but his eyes glittered with victory. He'd baited me in front of an audience, just the way he liked it. Before I could answer, Harper's new husband chimed in, trying to smooth things over. Come on, Greg, everyone moves at their own pace. But Dad waved it off, chuckling again. Sure, but you can't live like a teenager forever. At some point, the real world knocks, and you need to answer. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. The old urge returned, to defend myself, to explain everything I'd built, the hours, the grind, the deals. But I knew better. Explanations only gave him more rope to pull tighter. Across the room, I saw my mother laughing with one of Harper's friend's parents, her hand resting proudly on Harper's shoulder. They looked like a portrait of what she always wanted, one perfect daughter, one successful family. And me? I was just a guest in their painting. Dinner rolled on, but the little barbs didn't stop. When the waiter poured wine, Dad smirked and said, Better savor it, Rowan. This is the good stuff. Not what you're used to. When Harper opened gifts, Mom said sweetly, We're so proud of you, honey. Always knew you'd make us proud. Her eyes slid over me, unspoken but sharp, unlike someone else. Each little moment stacked on top of the last. The laughter, the dismissive glances, the careful framing of Harper as the perfect child while I sat in the shadows. They weren't screaming. They didn't need to. Their talent had always been making cruelty look like concern, making me the punchline of a joke only they laughed at. By dessert, my father was holding court again, bragging about Harper's new house, the neighborhood, the square footage. Real property, he said, raising his glass once more. Something you can stand on. Not just paper and promises. His eyes flicked to me like a knife. I tightened my grip on the keys in my pocket, feeling the weight of metal against my palm. Not yet, I thought. But soon. And just as the room quieted for toasts, my dad stood again, this time with a deliberate smile. He clinked his glass, looked straight at me, and said, Ladies and gentlemen, my dad's voice boomed over the clinking of forks and low hum of conversation. If I could have your attention. The room gradually quieted. The band softened their playing. Guests turned toward him, glasses lifted halfway, expectant smiles plastered across faces. He stood tall, confident, savoring the spotlight like it was owed to him. He cleared his throat with a theatrical pause. Tonight isn't just about celebrating Harper and her new husband, though of course, they are the stars of the evening. It's also a chance for family to come together, to reflect on what matters most. His eyes slid toward me, the corners of his mouth curling as if he were holding back a secret. I knew that look. My gut twisted. He went on, his words heavy with syrup and steel. You know, when you raise kids, you do your best to guide them. Sometimes, one child listens. One child honors the lessons, carries on the family name with pride. He lifted his glass toward Harper, who smiled shyly, though I noticed a flicker of unease in her eyes. And sometimes, he turned, the weight of his gaze falling on me. Sometimes the other thinks he knows better. He runs off, makes mistakes, chooses, well, a different path. The crowd tittered politely, unsure whether to laugh. My chest tightened. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. And here we are 10 years later. Dad continued, voice rising as if he were delivering a sermon. One child standing tall on her wedding day, surrounded by family, love, stability. And the other? Still wandering, still renting. The word landed like a stone. He let the pause hang, then chuckled, sipping his wine. But that's life, isn't it? Some choices pay off. Some don't. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. I wanted to stand up, to shout, but I froze, every muscle locked. My mother gave a delicate laugh, shaking her head as though to soften his cruelty. "Oh, Greg, don't be so hard," she said, her voice dripping with mock chastisement. But her eyes sparkled with agreement. Then came the part that burned the deepest. Dad gestured toward me with his glass, raising his brows. "But we love Rowan anyway. He's always been the dreamer. We kept him afloat longer than we should have, God knows. Paid his way, gave him chance after chance. But hey, that's what parents do, right? You can't save everyone from themselves." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the tables. My heart dropped like a stone into water. He'd just laid out our family's private history like entertainment, rewriting it in real time, making me the charity case, the burden, the black sheep who squandered their generosity. Harper's new husband shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting on hers. She looked torn, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but her silence was louder than any defense. The betrayal wasn't just in his words. It was in the way Mom smiled as though this was all in good fun, in the way Harper stayed quiet to protect her perfect day, in the way the guests nodded politely and sipped their drinks to smooth over the tension. They all sat there while my father dismantled me in public, reducing my years of sacrifice and hard work to a caricature of failure. My fingers closed tight around the keys in my pocket, digging into the metal so hard I felt the edges bite my skin. Rage simmered, but under it, something colder settled in. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was a line crossing, a torching of whatever fragile thread of respect might have still existed between us. I forced myself to stay still, my lips pressed into a thin line as the toast ended with laughter that wasn't laughter at all. It was people trying to move past discomfort. Dad sat back down, smug, basking in his performance. The room picked up again, chatter resuming, forks scraping plates. But to me, the night had shifted. Something broke clean through, and I knew in that moment there was no going back. And then, as if to twist the knife, my mother leaned across the table, her voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You could have had all of this, Rowan. If only you'd listened." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just favoritism or cruelty. It was betrayal, through and through. They hadn't just cut me off 10 years ago. They had erased me. And now, they were parading the erasure as proof of their righteousness. I swallowed hard, every nerve in me screaming. The time for silence was ending. Soon, very soon, I'd show them what listening to myself had really built. But first, I let them believe they'd won. I didn't taste a single bite of dessert. The room blurred in waves of clinking silverware and polite laughter while I sat perfectly still, my hand wrapped around the stem of my glass, so tightly I was surprised it didn't shatter. My father's words looped in my head on repeat, each replay heavier than the last. We kept him afloat longer than we should have. The way he'd said it, casual, almost generous, reduced every sleepless night, every double shift, every sacrifice I had made to nothing more than their kindness. It wasn't just humiliation. It was erasure. He had rewritten my story in front of an audience, and no one stopped him. Not my mother, who just smiled tightly as though his cruelty was tradition. Not Harper, who, despite the flicker of discomfort in her eyes, chose silence over disruption. And not the guests, who nodded along because polite people don't intervene when family puts one of their own on a spit and turns them slowly. I excused myself halfway through the coffee course. The room was too warm, and I couldn't breathe beneath the weight of the polite glances, the subtle pity. I slipped out into the corridor, past a waiter carrying a tray of champagne, and leaned against the cool brick wall just outside the main hall. My reflection stared back at me in one of the glass doors, suit perfectly pressed, expression unreadable, but eyes red at the edges. I hadn't cried in years. Not since that day I walked out at 19 with nothing but a backpack and a vow to myself. But standing there in the quiet, with laughter echoing from the hall, I felt something close to it rise in my chest. It wasn't weakness. It was grief. The grief of realizing that no matter what I accomplished, to them, I would always be the boy who failed to bend. For a moment, I considered leaving, just walking out into the night, starting the car, and driving until the venue was nothing more than headlights in the rearview mirror. Let them have their narrative. Let them believe I was too ashamed to stay. I pictured my father, swirling his glass in smug satisfaction, my mother shaking her head as if I'd proven her right, Harper resuming her smiles because that was easier than defending me. If I left, they'd never know what I'd built. The thought twisted something deep inside me. I pressed my palms against the wall, forcing air into my lungs. That's what they wanted. To silence me. To turn me invisible again. To make me believe that all I had was survival, not victory. A faint shuffle of footsteps interrupted my spiral. One of the staff, a young server with nervous eyes, paused when she saw me in the corridor. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked gently. She didn't know who I was. To her, I was just another guest. "Yes," I said after a pause, straightening. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Everything's fine." She nodded, hesitated as if she wanted to say more, then hurried back toward the kitchen. I slipped my hand back into my pocket, feeling the keys again. Cold, solid, real. That tiny ring of metal was the only anchor I needed. They didn't know. Not yet. To them, I was still the failure, the renter, the dreamer who never grew up. But I had something they couldn't take from me, something they couldn't rewrite with speeches or pitying smiles. I stayed outside until my heartbeat slowed, until the ache in my chest became a slow burn instead of a raw wound. Then I walked back in, head high, slipping into my seat like nothing had happened. My father gave me a smug little nod, as if he thought I'd slunk off to lick my wounds. My mother avoided eye contact. Harper caught my gaze for the briefest moment, then looked away. I said nothing. I ate nothing. I let them believe they'd won. But as the night pressed on, I started to see it differently. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a stage. They had chosen to put me under the lights, strip me down in front of an audience. They thought they'd written the ending already. But what they didn't realize was that I had the final line waiting in my pocket, glinting with promise. For now, though, I played the part they expected, silent, diminished, the brother who didn't belong. Let them lean back in their chairs, smug and satisfied. Let them toast Harper and her perfect future. Because when the curtain lifted again, I'd be ready. The night of Harper's wedding left me hollow, but also sharpened. When I drove home afterward, headlights stretching down empty roads, I replayed every word of my father's toast, every glance from my mother, every silence from Harper. It burned, yes, but fire can harden. By the time I reached my driveway, the humiliation had calcified into something steadier, resolve. I threw myself back into work the next morning. That's always been my language. Building, refining, making systems run smoother. The venue deal I had struck a few months prior wasn't just some vanity project or nostalgic whim. It was a cornerstone. Weddings may look like flowers and champagne on the surface, but beneath all that is structure, contracts, logistics, liability, and endless numbers. Numbers I understood like second nature. Within the first 6 months of ownership, I cut costs by almost a third without laying off a single staff member. I renegotiated supplier contracts, installed a new booking system, and brought in a local architect to tackle the parking issue that had plagued the venue for years. Word began to spread that the old money pit of a hall was turning into the most reliable venue in the county. Couples who once dismissed it as too risky started lining up, and planners whispered my name as the one who made the place actually work. But the venue was just one piece. The consulting work I'd been doing quietly for years blossomed into something larger than I'd anticipated. Small business owners referred me to their friends, who referred me to developers, who referred me to city planners. One contract turned into 3, then 10. Before long, I wasn't just fixing books and leases, I was advising entire redevelopment projects. A district that had been written off as too far gone came back to life, brick by brick, with my fingerprints on the paperwork that made it possible. Money began flowing in ways I'd once thought impossible. At first, I spent cautiously, almost guiltily, paying off debts, setting up reserves, making sure I'd never feel the cold grip of scarcity again. But eventually, I allowed myself a few things. A home of my own, not lavish, but with wide windows that let in morning light. A car that didn't stall at intersections. Time, sweet, precious time, to wake up without panic gnawing at my stomach. Still, I kept quiet about it all. I didn't post glossy photos online. I didn't call my parents or send updates. I stayed invisible, letting them believe their story about me remained true. Their silence toward me became an armor, a shield that kept my growth mine alone. Every ignored birthday, every unanswered holiday, every Christmas card that never came. It only carved the space where my independence rooted deeper. There were moments, though, when I caught glimpses of their world through secondhand whispers. A family friend would mention how Harper had landed another big client with mom's firm, or how dad was talking up the perfect son-in-law at some gathering. Not once did my name surface, except as a cautionary tale, a shadow in their golden narrative. And oddly enough, I let them keep it. Because while they clung to their fiction, I was building something real. I didn't just rise financially, I grew stronger personally. I learned how to walk into a room full of men like my father, men who thought dominance equaled respect, and outlast them. I learned patience, the kind that waits out storms and opportunists alike. I even learned how to enjoy solitude, not as loneliness, but as sovereignty. 1 year turned into 3. 3 turned into 5. By the time Harper's wedding anniversary rolled around, I had quietly expanded into multiple ventures, the venue thriving, my consulting firm running with a full staff, and a small real estate portfolio under my management. I had partnerships with city officials who once wouldn't have returned my emails. And every contract, every property, every successful event layered onto the same foundation. I no longer owed anyone permission to exist. Yet despite all of it, one thought persisted in the back of my mind. They still believed I was nothing. My father still held court at dinner parties, I was sure, talking about the son who never grew up. My mother still shook her head and sighed if my name came up. Harper still played along with the silence, comfortable in her place as the chosen one. They didn't know. Not yet. And maybe that was why, when the next family gathering surfaced on the horizon, another celebration, another spotlight, I didn't decline the invitation. This time, I felt no dread. This time, I felt something else entirely, anticipation. Because they had built a story with me as the failure. But I had been busy writing my own ending. It was late autumn when the first real crack in my family's picture-perfect wall appeared. The leaves outside my office window had turned the color of copper pennies, and I was reviewing a redevelopment proposal when a familiar name slid across my desk, Hale Properties. My father's company. The report was blunt: mismanagement, over-leveraged loans, properties sitting vacant. It was all couched in polite business language, but I didn't need anyone to translate. The empire my dad loved to brag about at barbecues was crumbling quietly beneath him. The kind of collapse that doesn't make the news but whispers through bank offices and city councils, turning into a weight no amount of charm can lift. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled, and let the realization settle. For years, he'd lorded over me with stories of ownership, stability, real property. Now the truth was in black and white. He was slipping. And worse for him, I was in a position to see the entire unraveling. That same week, the venue hosted a charity gala for the local hospital, a polished event, full of the kind of donors who measure each other by square footage and last names. I moved through the room quietly, shaking hands, listening more than I spoke. At one point, the mayor's aide leaned in and said, "Rowan, your work downtown has made our lives a lot easier. You've turned things around in ways most thought impossible." Compliments like that didn't inflate me anymore. They solidified something steadier: influence. Later that evening, while watching the guests dance under the golden lights, I overheard 2 planners talking about my mother and Harper's firm. Apparently, they were struggling too, losing clients to younger, fresher companies who didn't cling to outdated practices. "They still think their name is enough?" One of the planners whispered with a laugh. "But times change. People want results, not just appearances." It hit me then. All those years they dismissed me as a failure. They had been rotting from within. The foundation they stood on was cracked, and they hadn't even noticed. Over the next months, I began gathering threads. Not maliciously at first, just out of habit, the way I've always studied systems. I looked deeper into Hale Properties filings. I spoke with city contacts who let slip that Dad had burned bridges with inspectors. I listened to planners complain about Mom's cold approach and Harper's entitlement in meetings. Everywhere I turned, the cracks widened. And quietly, without anyone realizing, I positioned myself to catch what they dropped. When a block of commercial spaces my father once bragged about owning went into foreclosure, my firm was one of the first to get the call. We didn't buy them directly, not yet, but we structured the deal, advised the buyer, and set terms that put me squarely in control of the management contract. Each step was deliberate, each move made with patience. I didn't need to announce anything. The power was in knowing, in being prepared when opportunity knocked. Meanwhile, the venue flourished. Every season brought more bookings, more prestige. Couples waited months for a date. Planners called me first. The staff trusted me implicitly, and the building that once struggled now carried a heartbeat steady enough to drown out my father's sneers. And then, one evening, I received another envelope. Heavy, expensive paper. This time, it was an anniversary celebration, Harper and her husband's first year together. Hosted, of course, by my parents. The invitation was gilded, almost ostentatious, as though they needed the shimmer to distract from the fraying edges of their own world. I turned the card over in my hand, a smile tugging at my lips. They were still playing the same game. Appearances, perfection, control, while I had shifted leagues ahead. They thought I was still the outlier, the afterthought. They had no idea I was sitting at the crossroads of their business, their reputation, and their carefully crafted illusions. This wasn't just a family dinner anymore. This was an arena. And as I placed the invitation on my desk beside the stack of contracts waiting for my signature, I realized something important. I didn't just have the chance to defend myself anymore. I had the chance to decide the narrative. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one waiting for their approval. They were walking into my shadow, whether they knew it or not. The anniversary party was held at one of the high-end restaurants downtown, the sort of place my parents used to sneer at when they thought it was too modern, but now leaned on for appearances. The invitation had been dripping with pomp, a night of celebration, family, and the strength of legacy. Legacy. That word again. My father loved to wield it like a sword, as though our bloodline alone carried weight enough to excuse every slight. I arrived deliberately late, not sloppy late, but the kind of late that draws eyes when you enter, when conversations briefly still because people wonder if your absence was intentional. My suit was understated, tailored, but not flashy. I didn't need flash anymore. Quiet confidence is louder than gold when played right. The host ushered me in, and I caught sight of my parents across the room, basking in their usual glow. Dad was already animated, gesturing with his glass, making some point I could guess at from the smirk curling his lips. Mom stood beside him, nodding in agreement, every movement rehearsed. Harper and her husband were at the center table, glowing with newlywed sheen, her hand adorned with a diamond bracelet that caught every glint of light. When they saw me, reactions flickered quickly. Harper's smile wavered, caught between warmth and unease. Mom's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, the way hers always did when she calculated whether my presence helped or hurt the image she wanted. And Dad, he smirked. That smug, polished smirk that had lived in my head for 10 years. "Rowan," he boomed, voice carrying across the tables. "You came after all." The words sounded welcoming, but underneath them lay the same barb. You came, but you're still second tier. I shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and let the evening flow. The dinner courses rolled out, one after another, until the room settled into its rhythm. That was when Dad inevitably rose for his toast. "Family," he declared, lifting his glass. "There's nothing stronger. And tonight, we celebrate not just Harper and her husband, but the foundation we've built. The work, the sacrifices, the name." He let his gaze sweep the room, landing on me as though to remind the audience of his wayward son narrative. "We are proud of our children," he added with mock generosity. "Even when they stumble, we still hope they find their footing." A few polite chuckles. This time, I didn't stay seated. I stood slowly, calm as stone, letting the scrape of my chair draw every eye my way. My heart thudded once, hard, then steadied. "Dad," I said evenly, voice cutting through the room without needing volume. "That's a nice speech. You've always been good at those." I let the words hang. But speeches don't pay debts. Contracts do. The air shifted instantly, like the collective intake of breath before a storm. My father blinked, the smirk faltering just a fraction. "You know," I continued, pulling a slim leather folder from my jacket, "it's funny. A few months ago, a block of properties went under foreclosure. Hale Properties, wasn't it? Murmurs rippled through the room. I recognized the name, of course. And when the city needed someone reliable to handle the management contract, guess whose firm they called? I laid the folder gently on the table, sliding it toward him. His face reddened, the confident mask cracking. "What is this?" he demanded. "Records," I said simply. "Proof. My team handles those properties now. Yours didn't make the cut." Gasps scattered across the room like shattering glass. Mom's face drained of color. Harper's eyes widened, her hand tightening around her husband's. I leaned slightly closer, my tone still calm, conversational, even polite. "For years, you told me I'd never make it without you, that I'd never own anything real. But Dad, every tenant in that block pays rent to me now. Not you. Me." Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating silence. My father's mouth opened, closed, no words coming out. For the first time in my life, he looked small. I straightened, slipping the keys from my pocket, letting them jingle softly in my hand. "It's not about money anymore," I said, scanning the room. "It's about rewriting the story. You tried to erase me, but I'm still here, stronger. And this time, the truth is on paper." I set the keys down on the folder with a quiet click, then lifted my own glass in a slow, deliberate toast. To family, and to standing on your own. Around the room, some guests raised their glasses hesitantly. Others sat in stunned silence. My mother's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. My father stared at the folder as though it might burn through the table. Harper looked at me with something unreadable, part guilt, part awe, part fear. The power had shifted. Cleanly, irrevocably. But I wasn't finished yet. The silence after my toast seemed to stretch forever. You could almost hear the collective discomfort rattling through the room. Glasses half raised, eyes darting, people trying to decide whether to drink or to watch the wreckage unfold. My father's face, usually so perfectly composed, flushed a dark crimson. He opened his mouth once, twice, as if words might come, but all he managed was a hoarse, "That's not," before cutting himself off. His eyes flicked down at the folder, the damning paperwork laid bare before him. Mom reached for his arm, her diamond bracelet glinting under the chandelier light. "Greg," she hissed softly, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Not here. Sit down." Her gaze darted nervously around the room, reading every stare like it was a scandal waiting to hit the papers. But she wasn't smiling anymore. The carefully painted mask had slipped, and for once, she looked cornered. Harper's husband leaned toward her, whispering something in her ear. Harper, though, kept her eyes on me. She didn't say a word, but the flush on her cheeks betrayed how deeply shaken she was. The perfect daughter, the one they'd always paraded as the shining example, was seeing the foundation of her pedestal crumble in real time. A guest 2 tables over finally broke the tension with a nervous laugh. "Well," he muttered, raising his glass higher, "I'll drink to that." A ripple of chuckles followed, this time more genuine. Other glasses lifted too. One by one, the room aligned with me, not with them. My toast had landed, and theirs was dead on arrival. Dad shoved his chair back abruptly, the scrape echoing across the hardwood floors. "This is nonsense," he snapped, though his voice cracked under the strain. "You think this proves something? You think a stack of papers makes you better than family?" I stayed seated, calm, composed, my glass still in hand. "No," I said quietly. "It proves I don't need your permission to exist. It proves that while you mocked me for building nothing, I was building everything you failed to protect." Gasps and murmurs swept through the tables. My father's hands curled into fists at his sides, but there was no fight left in him. Not here. Not in front of all these witnesses. He turned on his heel and stormed toward the doors, his exit as graceless as it was final. My mother remained frozen for a beat longer, her lips trembling with words she couldn't form. Then, realizing the eyes still on her, she gathered her shawl around her shoulders and followed him out, her heels clicking like nails in a coffin. The room exhaled as though a storm had passed. Conversations resumed hesitantly, laughter re-emerging in careful spurts. But the shift was permanent. The aura of control my parents had wielded over every gathering, every family story, was gone, shattered in a single evening. Harper looked at me across the table, eyes shining with something between sorrow and reluctant respect. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to bridge the years of silence with a single sentence. I didn't press. Not tonight. Instead, I rose slowly, collected the folder and the keys, and slipped them back into my jacket. Then I raised my glass once more, not to my family, but to the room itself. To truth, I said simply. And this time, the cheer that followed was unanimous. As I left the restaurant, the night air cool against my face, I felt no urge to look back. The story my father had told about me for years, the one where I was the failure, the drifter, the dreamer who'd never measure up, was finished, rewritten, and in its place stood something stronger. A man who had been cut off, erased, and humiliated, but who had built himself into someone they could no longer control, no longer define, no longer diminish. I slid into my car, the city lights reflecting off the windshield, and allowed myself the smallest of smiles. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider at their table anymore. I was the one who owned it. My name's Marcus. I'm 34, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you that my younger brother Josh and I were close, like stupidly close. I helped him through college, let him crash on my couch more times than I can count, backed his business idea with $20,000, a loan that magically turned into a gift. And last year, when he and his girlfriend Emily found the perfect little condo but couldn't afford first and last month's rent, I stepped in without hesitation. That was always how I operated. Quietly, helpfully, no strings. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted my brother to have the shot at the life he was always chasing. But somewhere along the line, Josh mistook generosity for weakness. He stopped saying thank you, stopped calling just to talk. And slowly, things shifted. I was no longer the supportive older brother. I was the wallet, the fixer, the backup plan. And I didn't even realize it until it was too late. The final straw came the night of his engagement dinner. Josh and Emily were hosting it at this overpriced restaurant downtown, some rooftop place with string lights and wine lists longer than my apartment lease. It was fancy, sure, but I was genuinely happy for them. Despite everything, I'd planned a surprise. I was going to cover 6 months of their rent on the new condo they were moving into next week. I'd written out the check, sealed it in a crisp white envelope, and even added a little note, just a simple proud of you, little bro. I pictured him getting emotional, maybe hugging me, telling Emily's family how I'd always been there for him. But that's not how it went. I arrived 15 minutes early, per usual. The host gave me a weird look when I said Josh's name, like he didn't expect me to be on the list. After confirming, he finally led me up to the rooftop, where a dozen people were already mingling around champagne flutes and tiny crab cakes. I spotted Josh at the far end, laughing with Emily's dad, wearing that smug, too smooth expression he always used when he was trying to impress someone. He barely looked at me when I approached. Just a quick chin nod, then a dismissive, "Hey, you made it." Like I was the distant cousin, not the guy who paid his security deposit. Still, I brushed it off. Dinner started fine, salads, polite small talk, awkward laughter between our family and Emily's. Josh was holding court like he always did, telling the same tired story about how he sold sneakers in high school to learn business. I let him have his moment. That was the plan. Be supportive. Let him shine. And then, at the right moment, after dessert, maybe I'd hand him the envelope and watch his face light up. That moment never came. Instead, about midway through the dinner, Josh raised his glass and tapped it for attention. "Thanks for coming, everyone. It means a lot to have all of you here, especially Emily's family, who's basically taken me in like one of their own." I tilted my head slightly. No mention of our parents, who drove 6 hours to be there. No mention of me. And of course, he continued, a huge shout out to my beautiful fiancée, who said yes even though I'm a total mess most days. I promise I'll try to be worth it. Everyone clapped. Emily blushed. Her mom wiped a tear. It was sweet, genuine, even, but still, not one word to me. Not even when the waiter brought out a small cake with "Congrats, Josh," and Emily piped in gold icing. I thought maybe he was saving it. Maybe there'd be a toast later. A private word. Something. I waited. I sipped my drink. I forced myself to laugh at the jokes. Finally, as the plates were being cleared, I saw my window. I stood up quietly, slid the envelope from my coat pocket, and cleared my throat. "Hey, before the night's over, I just wanted to say congrats again." Josh raised an eyebrow. "You already said that, didn't you?" There was a hint of sarcasm in his voice, and Emily's brother snorted. I ignored it. I had something for you guys." I set the envelope in front of them. Just a little help on the condo, 6 months' rent, fully covered. The table went silent. Emily looked shocked. Her parents exchanged glances. Josh? He stared at the envelope, then laughed. Not a small laugh, like full-on amusement. Dude, seriously? I blinked. What? He picked up the envelope and waved it mockingly. I mean, this is great and all, but if you really wanted to make a difference, maybe throw in a year? Who knows? Maybe then you'd actually make the guest list. The entire table chuckled. A few nervously. One of Emily's cousins went, oof. My heart dropped. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because, in that moment, everything crystallized. Every favor. Every dollar. Every time I bailed him out and got nothing but silence in return, it all snapped into place. I wasn't family to him. I was leverage. An ATM. An accessory. So I smiled, reached across the table, and calmly took back the envelope. Josh raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? I leaned in slightly, placed a single sheet of paper in its place, and said, actually, you have 30 days to move out. He froze. What? I turned the page toward him so he could read the header, Notice of Lease Termination. Then I glanced at Emily's stunned parents and added, I own the building. The silence at the table was deafening. Emily's face went pale. Her dad set down his wine, his mouth slightly open. Josh stared at the paper like it was in another language. You're evicting us, he said quietly. I shrugged. No hard feelings. It's just business. But hey, maybe Emily's family can take you in again. Like one of their own. And with that, I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and turned to leave, just as Josh's voice cracked behind me. Wait, Marcus, come on. You're not serious. I didn't look back as I walked toward the elevator. Didn't need to. I could hear the muffled voices behind me, the shocked murmurs, and the sharp whisper of Emily's mom hissing something like, You didn't tell us he owned the place? The elevator dinged open, and I stepped in with the same quiet, deliberate calm I'd always used when fixing Josh's messes. Only this time, I wasn't cleaning anything up. I was letting it collapse. The drive home was silent, just the low hum of the city rushing past my windows. I didn't even turn on the radio. My phone buzzed twice before I hit the freeway, both from Josh. The first was a missed call. The second was a text, Dude. WTF, call me. I didn't. Instead, I pulled into my apartment garage, went upstairs, and sat in the dark for a while. No TV. No music. Just silence. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how long I'd let this version of our relationship drag on. How many small moments I brushed off. How many times I'd told myself he'd grow out of it, that he was just immature, stressed, figuring things out. It's funny, people think betrayal is always loud. A big blow-up, screaming, dramatic exits. But for me, it was a quiet erosion, a slow chipping away of respect. And the worst part was, I let it happen. Josh didn't try again that night. But by morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 3 missed calls from him. 2 from Emily. 1 from my mom. I ignored all of them. By noon, I'd forwarded the official notice to their email, CCNG the property manager. No loopholes. No extensions. 30 days. I'd made sure of it. At 2:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail from my mother. I listened. Marcus, honey, what is going on? Josh called us this morning, absolutely devastated. You didn't tell him you own the building? He says you blindsided him. Please, call me back. This feels extreme. I rolled my eyes. Of course. Devastated. Not apologetic. Not grateful. Just blindsided. Like I had snuck up behind him and pushed him off a cliff he'd been dancing on for years. I didn't respond. The next 2 days were more the same. Josh tried alternating between pleading and raging. One message would say, You made your point, man. Can we just talk? And the next would read, You're such a bitter little loser. This is why Dad never respected you. That one made me laugh. Then came Emily. She wasn't hostile, just confused. I know he can be dumb, but he didn't mean it. He was just trying to make a joke in front of his family. He really does appreciate you, Marcus. We both do. I stared at that message for a while. I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered how she smirked when Josh made the maybe you'll make the guest list comment. How she didn't say anything. How she only reached out after the rent was gone. Nope. That Sunday, I went to the building. Not to confront them, just to make sure things were in order. The unit was quiet. Blinds drawn. No signs of packing. I knocked once, just out of courtesy. No answer. As I turned to leave, the door opened behind me. Josh stood there in sweatpants, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess. Seriously, he muttered. You're gonna throw us out over a joke? I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anything. No guilt, no second guessing, just a weird, peaceful detachment. It wasn't a joke, I said calmly. It was a mirror. He frowned. What does that even mean? It means, I said, that what you said at dinner? That wasn't some offhand comment. That was the truth you say when you think you don't need me anymore. And you were right about one thing. I don't belong on your guest list. Because I'm not your brother anymore. I'm just the guy you use when things get hard. Josh shook his head. You're overreacting. I smiled. And you're underreacting to the fact that you just burned the last bridge that ever carried you. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Instead, he just leaned against the doorframe, defeated. I'll have my stuff out in 2 weeks, he mumbled. You've got 4. I reminded him. Use them wisely. And I left. But that wasn't the end. A week later, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Uncle Ray. My dad's younger brother. The one relative who never picked sides when our family started splintering after Dad passed. He wasn't close to Josh or me, but he always watched from the sidelines. His message just said, saw what happened. Got something you might want to know. Call me when you can. That was the moment I realized this might be bigger than just rent and disrespect. This might go deeper. I stared at Uncle Ray's message for a full minute before calling. Ray wasn't the type to reach out unless it really mattered. The last time we spoke was at Dad's funeral 5 years ago, and even then, it was more nods and handshakes than conversation. But something about his timing and the way he phrased it sent a chill down my spine. He picked up on the second ring. Marcus, he said, like he'd been expecting my call all day. Hey, Uncle Ray. I got your message. Good. Listen, what happened with Josh? I don't want to get in the middle of your business, but I've been holding on to something for a while now. I didn't think it was my place. But after hearing what he pulled at that dinner, I leaned forward, elbows on my desk. What is it? Ray let out a long breath. It's about your dad's trust. The one he set up before he passed. My stomach tightened. What about it? I asked. Ray paused. You always believed it was split evenly, right? That you and Josh each got half. I blinked. That's what the lawyer told us. Josh was 24 at the time. I was 29. It made sense. Ray sighed. That's not exactly what your dad wanted. I was there when he drafted the first version. The original plan was to leave everything to you. All of it. He said, and I quote, Josh needs to learn how to build. Marcus already does. But after your mom intervened, they amended it to an even split. That didn't surprise me. Mom always coddled Josh. But I still didn't understand the point of this conversation. Okay, I said slowly. But we did split it evenly. I used mine to start my business. Josh blew his on some app idea and that ridiculous motorcycle. End of story. Ray chuckled grimly. Not quite. 2 months after your dad's funeral, Josh came to me. Said he needed help moving some money around. He claimed you'd already taken your half, and he just wanted to pull his out quietly, without lawyers being nosy. I didn't touch it, but I did tell him something. What? I asked. I told him there was a third account. I froze. What? Ray's voice was calm. Your dad was a cautious man. He didn't trust Josh's judgment, even with the split. So he set aside a separate investment account, stocks, bonds, a few long-term holdings. He called it Marcus's anchor. Said you were the kind of man who'd never ask for help, so he'd leave help where you wouldn't think to look. Told me about it over drinks one night. Said not even your mom knew. I stood up slowly from my desk, heart pounding. So what are you saying? There's money in my name that I don't even know about. Ray hesitated. I'm saying Josh found it. My blood ran cold. He drained it, didn't he? I whispered. Ray didn't answer at first. Then he said, I don't have hard proof. But I know he started driving a new car not long after. Got real quiet when I asked about his finances. Your dad's old broker retired, but I can put you in touch with the firm that absorbed his files. They'll know. I leaned on the desk, breath shallow. And you didn't say anything before now? I thought it was family business, he said. I told myself it wasn't my place. But hearing about what he said to you at that dinner, I realized I'd been protecting someone who stopped deserving it a long time ago. I didn't even thank him. I just said, send me the contact. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I was on the phone with the financial firm Ray mentioned. After a few rounds of security checks, I finally got a woman named Barbara on the line, mid-50s, polite, careful. Yes, Mr. Wyatt, she said. Your name is listed on an account originally established by Gregory Wyatt in 2008. However, it was closed in 2021. My throat tightened. Closed? By who? There was a pause on her end. I'm afraid I can't give you that information directly over the phone, but I can send the closure documents to the address we have on file. That would be. She read out Josh's condo address. I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. Thank you, I said, through gritted teeth. Actually, update the mailing address to my primary residence. I'll verify it now. By the time the documents arrived 2 days later, I'd already started pulling every thread I could find. Phone logs, emails, my father's old notebooks. I even went back to the lawyer who handled the estate, requesting a full breakdown of every asset ever dispersed. Most of it checked out, but the timeline of the Anchor account? Something was off. The documents confirmed it. Josh had posed as me. He'd forged the signature, used an ID he must have faked or borrowed, and quietly siphoned the funds over the course of 2 months. Nearly $190,000. Gone. I stared at the number for what felt like hours. Not because I needed the money, I was doing fine. It was the principle, the weight of it. My father had trusted me, believed in me enough to build a quiet parachute I never asked for. And Josh had cut it loose, mid-flight. My phone buzzed again that evening this time. It was Emily. Please don't do this to him. He's not perfect, but he's trying. This eviction is destroying him. I typed back. He destroyed something first. No response. For a few days, I waited. Then I made my next move. I didn't yell. I didn't call. I didn't even warn him. But by the end of the week, he'd wake up to a very different kind of letter. One that starts with Dear Mr. Wyatt and ends with formal charges of financial fraud. I didn't sleep the night before the letter hit Josh's mailbox. Not because I was nervous. No, I had already crossed that line. I'd wrestled with guilt, with second-guessing, with the heavy ache of betrayal. But by now, those feelings had hardened into something else. Something sharper. This wasn't vengeance for the sake of vengeance. This was justice. My father trusted me with that Anchor fund. Josh buried it in his pocket like a piece of stolen silver, and I wasn't going to let that stand. So when the certified letter was delivered, courtesy of a fraud investigator I hired privately before anything went to court, I sat back and waited. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't check social media. I just waited. It took 20 hours. At 11:02 the next morning, Josh showed up at my office. I could see him from the security camera feed at the front desk, hair wild, hoodie pulled up, a mess of nerves barely disguised by forced bravado. My assistant buzzed me. There's a man named Josh Wyatt downstairs. Says he's your brother. Tell him I'm in a meeting, I said, without hesitation. Should I? Give him a copy of the document in the red folder marked Fraud Disclosure. I had prepared it days earlier. I had a feeling he'd come in person. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then I got a text. Josh, you're actually going to ruin my life over this? We're family. Then another. Josh, come on, man. You don't need the money. Followed by, Josh, fine. If this is how you want to play it, I'll burn with you. I muted his number. Later that evening, I got a call from Emily. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. Marcus, look, I didn't know about the money. I swear, I thought you'd given it to him. He told me his dad left him something directly and that you didn't need it. I didn't question it. I should have, but I didn't. And now everything's falling apart. He's losing it, Marcus. He can't sleep. He hasn't been to work. He thinks you're going to send him to jail. Are you? Yes. But I didn't say that. I didn't respond. Instead, I let the investigator do his job. And he did it well. By the end of the week, Josh was served with an official complaint detailing the full extent of the financial fraud, forging my identity, misrepresenting himself to a financial institution, and illegally transferring funds from a trust account. The total damage? $188,294.37, not including interest. The investigator even managed to trace the transactions: 2 luxury vacations, a lease on a Tesla, the failed startup he'd been pretending to bootstrap. He hadn't just used the money, he wasted it. The legal process wasn't fast. It took months to get the court date. During that time, I didn't speak to Josh. Not once. Our mother tried calling me, of course. First to guilt trip, then to beg. You can't be serious, she said in one voicemail. He's your brother. He's your blood. And in another, you know how hard life's been on him, Marcus. You always had it easier. Let it go. Easier? That was rich. I paid my way through college while Josh got help at every step. I stayed behind to take care of Dad when his cancer got bad. I ran the errands. I made the appointments. And when Dad passed, I handled the funeral while Josh flew in late and left early. But sure, easier. My favorite call, though, came 2 weeks before the court date. From Josh. He didn't yell this time. He didn't threaten. He just pleaded. "Marcus," he said, "please, don't do this. I messed up. I know I did. But I'm not a criminal. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. I thought you wouldn't care. You've got your life together. You always have. I was drowning, and you had a life raft you didn't even know about." I panicked. He paused. "I'm sorry." It was the first time he'd said it, and it should have meant something. But it was too late. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse wearing a charcoal suit and steady nerves. Josh looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Emily sat behind him, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. The judge asked a few questions. Josh's lawyer tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding. I handed over the forged signature samples, the withdrawal logs, and the certified testimony from the financial advisor. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was methodical theft. Josh was given a choice: repay the funds in full, with interest, over a court-supervised repayment plan spanning the next 7 years, or face a felony charge and likely jail time. He chose the repayment plan. Barely. Afterward, outside the courtroom, he approached me. He looked hollow, ashamed. A piece of him finally understood the weight of what he'd done. "I meant what I said," he told me, "about being sorry." I nodded. "That's good. You should be. You really want me to pay all of it back?" "Yes. I'll lose everything." "Then maybe next time," I said quietly, "you won't treat people like they're disposable." He opened his mouth again, but no words came out. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, watching me walk away. I never heard from him again. As for the money, I didn't even need it. Once the first repayment check cleared, I redirected the funds to a scholarship program in our dad's name, one specifically aimed at kids with entrepreneurial dreams and no family support. Every dollar Josh returned went to someone who wouldn't squander it. That felt right. And the condo? I sold it. Not out of spite. Just closure. Emily moved out shortly after the hearing. Last I heard, she left Josh for good. Can't say I blame her. My mom still sends holiday cards. I don't reply. She made her choices too. Uncle Ray and I talk more now. We even grab coffee once a month. Turns out, he had more stories about Dad than I ever knew. As for me, I'm good. Really good. Not because I won, but because I stopped letting people take pieces of me without permission. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for family is stop letting them treat you like you owe them forever. Josh learned that the hard way. And I finally let go.